Good afternoon, everyone. Bill, I'm calling to order the Winnebago County Mental Health Board, Thursday, June 15th. Time is 1:02. First order of business is roll call. Mary Ann Abadi, present. Dr. Copeland.
Present.
Dr. Giardini.
Here.
Dr. Gorski.
Here.
Dick Cooner.
Here.
Wendy Larson Bennett. Tim Neighbor.
Here.
Linda Sankvist. Mohammed Yunus.
Here.
Jason Holcomb.
Here.
And welcome Chelsea Gladys and Nicole Bennett, part of our staff in Chelsea. We appreciate them. We can't do our work without their work, so thank you. Moving on to the public comment, of which we thought we had one person canceled, so moving on to the presentations. So as you do your presentation, we'd like you to introduce yourself. Oh, I thought there was, you said.
Well, it will start before the last action.
Okay, very good. So we'll move on to the monthly activity report. None.
We're gonna bypass that because we have so much content with the strategic planning. We'll cover a couple of months at the next board meeting. It's more of a standard board meeting.
Okay. Moving on to our action items, I'm going to need a motion to approve the minutes from the May meeting.
So moved. Second.
Dr. Gorski, Dick Cooner. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we are going to get into our resolution, the resolution authorizing funded program budgets, updates for program year 22-23. Jason, any comment?
Sure, this is the final month of budget amendments for the program year, which ended May 30th, or 31 days or 30 days, 31, May 31st of 2023. So these will be retroactive. They're retroactive requests for budget amendments. One is for Rosecrans access to care. They had, the way that they ended up doing their staffing, they had over budgeted for contracted professionals and then under budgeted for personnel. So I think they ended up doing some direct hires on things that they had previously thought would be contracted. So that just allows them to get through the end of their program year, reimbursed for the direct personnel. And then the second was for Rockford sexual assault counseling, which is a pretty small amount overall, but in aggregate with previous movement they've had, this would put them over their $3,000 line item allotment. So essentially they're just adding $1,500 to direct supplies and removing that from two other line items where they were slightly under budget.
Okay, I will need a motion.
So moved.
Okay, Dr. Gorski, I need a second.
Second.
Dr. Giardini, any discussion regarding the program updates? Budget updates? Okay, hearing none. All those, no, I have to do roll call. All right, going back to roll call. Dr. Copeland. Dr. Giardini.
Aye.
Dr. Gorski.
Aye.
Dick Cooner.
Yes. Wendy
Wendy Larson Bennett.
Yes.
Tim Neighbor.
Yes.
Linda Sankvist. Mohammed Yunus. Yes. Oh, Mary Ann Abadi. I wrote two, but afterwards, yes. Okay, a second action item is a resolution authorizing funded program budget updates, advanced payments for program year 22-23. Jason.
So this one is for the mobile integrated health program, wherein the board had allotted approximately $900,000 for both the purchase of the 911 center software upgrades and then also Sprinter vans for the mobile behavioral health teams. And due to supply chain issues on the equipment side, and then kind of the sequencing of the technology upgrades on the software side, they were not able to make all of those purchases in the program year. We require invoice reimbursement. So you kind of, by our normal standards, you would have to get that expensed during that 12-month period. So what we are proposing through this resolution is essentially that we would allow them a 1-year extension. And so that it doesn't extend into our next program year budget, that we do an advance payment of those awards, and then we just reconcile it at the end of the 12 months so that any unexpended dollars would be returned to the mental health board. Mental health board does have advance payment options. We've done this on a case-by-case basis for other programs in the past. So we do have reconciliation procedures already in place for that. This really just allows for that equipment cost that was intended to be for last program year in that program year budget, and not rolling over and tying up funds in a new program year where we didn't anticipate having those larger equipment costs. With that, I know we do have the chief and grant manager from City of Rockford available to answer questions should there be any.
Okay, I will need a motion to move it forward. Okay, Wendy Levison and Tim, second. Any other discussion or questions for the chief? Or
My main question is, do you have a delivery date on these vehicles?
The goal for the vehicles is the fall. October is the time frame we're working on,
Okay,
but unfortunately, we are at the mercy of the industry right now in terms of those supply chain issues that Jason had mentioned, but that is what the goal is.
and do you feel like they will honor whatever the purchase price is that we allocated?
I do. We're also trying to have a backup plan. So if we are unable to get those older vans, is there a way to retrofit and do something that will accommodate the same? So we are trying to work both
Okay,
angles, but the October timeline is associated with this.
okay. Would we be flexible enough with our motion to accommodate if there were changes like retrofitting vehicles or things like that, or would we'd have to come back and look at that?
amendment.
That's really only a factor.
I understand. I just want to make sure that we are flexible enough to.
Yeah, our basic reimbursement procedures are evidence of expense. If the expense is meeting the scope of work, but it's just a modification of the type of equipment, generally that doesn't require an additional amendment. That'll be, fit within what the scope of work was intended to be.
Kim,
And does the fire department use the same, like government purchasing program that most government entities use to purchase vehicles?
Yes,
Okay,
we
so
do.
that's the biggest issue. Because dealers are pushing governments to the back burner because they could charge more for vehicles, so they go to private sellers first. Yeah.
but that's. Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none. We'll take roll call. Dr. Copeland,
Yes.
Dr. Giardini,
Yes.
Dr. Gorski,
Yes.
Dick Kunert,
Yes.
Wendy Larson, Kim Neighbors,
Yes.
Linda Sanford, Mohammed Yunus,
Yes.
Mary Ann Abadi, yes. The resolution passes. And our next resolution is to authorize funded program budget updates, advance payment for stepping stones for program year 22-23.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Similar issue. In this case, it was capital dollars for the purchase of a multifamily home, which will be renovated to create supported housing. And the purchase of the property was made, but it takes time to do that and to close and find a suitable property that's coded. So by the time the purchase was made, we were kind of butting up against the end of the program year, and those renovation expenses were not able to be exhausted in this program year. So again, instead of tying up more funding in the new program year, we'd like to allow for a year window of extension and provide an advance payment for that and do a reconciliation so we can get it out of our budget, out of our account, I guess, so to speak, and keep it in our budget here.
Okay, we'll need a motion.
Also move.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have the first and a second. Do we have any questions, discussions? Sue Schroeder is here from Stepping Stones. Hearing none, I'll take roll call. Dr. Copeland,
Yes.
Dr. Giardini,
Yes.
Dr. Gorski.
Yes.
Dick Cooner,
Yes.
Wendy Larson Bennett.
Yeah.
Tim Neighbor,
Yes.
Linda Sandquist, Mohammed Yunus.
Yes.
Mary Ann Abadi, yes. Okay, resolution passes. We move on now to our officer
Thank you.
election. Sue, thank you. For this coming year. And we will need nomination for every office. And so at this time, I will, just open it up for nominations, first of all, for president.
I will move to nominate Mary Ann.
I will second. Third.
Tim,
Can we move to nominate all officers stay the same?
Yeah, so if,
Oh, okay. Throwing a little curveball there. You told us 10 years of this season.
you know,
Yeah.
I was already,
Public
you know,
official.
went over this. I agree, 100%.
All right, then I'll withdraw my nomination and nominate the slate.
I second
Okay, so,
I think we talked about this before. I know we have to do this. It's parliamentary procedure and we do it every year, but. You know, we put a president for 4 years. Let's just do that. I mean, why are we? I mean, it's kind of like, can we?
And 2 terms.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So anyways, that's just my 2 cents.
okay,
it. That's just something we got, that's our bylaws, right?
do we need a motion for
full slate.
some full
Let's
slate?
just, were there any other nominations for any other position? I just want to make sure that's clear that there is
Yes,
none. Okay,
opportunities.
so now we can do the full slate.
Okay, so
it
we
was
need.
Wendy.
Yeah, that was my
And then
That,
Okay.
we have, and
Yeah.
you were him second. Okay, roll call. Is that correct?
Yeah, just to be safe.
Okay, Dr. Copeland, Dr. Giardini,
Aye.
Dr. Gorski,
Yeah.
Dick Cooner,
Yes.
Wendy Larson Bennett, Tim Neighbors,
Yes.
Linda Sandquist, Mohammed Yunus,
Yes.
and Mary Ann Abadi, yes.
And
Okay,
just to be clear, so it's President Mary Ann, Richard Cooner, Vice President, Dr. Gorski is Secretary, and Wendy Larson Bennett is Treasurer. So just to be clear for the record.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Can we
Okay,
start the genuflect when we want?
Yes.
all right, we have a final action item is the approval of our fiscal year 2024 budget approval. So I will need a motion for
Mary Ann, so I was gonna do a presentation and then,
before.
and before this one, if the board would like maybe an operational overview.
I
of
think
kind
that
of the
would be
last 3
great.
years. We're going into a 3-year period.
So,
Okay,
so I need to make a motion a second in discussion.
I was gonna lead into the action item with the presentation, but I don't know that procedurally it matters that much which way you do it, so. Just, we'll kind of start with this and then there'll be an opportunity to vote on the budget and then we'll go into the strategic planning. One of the reasons, while maybe it would make sense to do the budget also after we talked about strategic plan, keep in mind, we're not finalizing the strategic plan today. There's always opportunities to do budget amendments or modifications should the final strategic plan dictate that we do things a little bit differently than we anticipated today, but for the timing that we want to be prepared to provide the county with the information they need for their annual budget packet. This is the time that we need to
Yes.
look at our budget. So just in general, today we'll be doing a quick operational overview. We'll look at our board foundations, which is really those mission, vision, values, and operating principles. And then we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of the strategic plan and thinking about what are the objectives and strategies that we should be incorporating into this next 3 years of work. So operationally, I thought it was just a good moment to reflect back on where we started. It was exactly 3 years ago, June of 2020, that I presented to the board along with my boss, Michael Dunn Jr., and we kind of communicated to the board. You see, it was actually before the mental health board had, we updated it. It originally was saying WCMHB, but we did update that. So we basically gave a vision to the board of what the planning council could provide for the mental health board. And so I wanted to reflect back on that just momentarily. And I put checks next to the things that we've been able to accomplish. So from general leadership, which includes being liaison, the budget preparation, the subject matter expertise that we can provide to things like grant proposals and grant compliance, the strategic planning process, now entering our second strategic plan, doing all of the surveying and data collection for that, doing the group facilitation between our funded partners and the board members to make sure we have the right strategies and engaging that lived experience and resident perspective. That grant making part, we were just thinking of it as implementation before, but the RFPs, which we're now have really been calling notice of funding opportunities, consulting and providing technical assistance to the providers who are applying. The one thing that we never really did was the grant writing. We thought maybe there would be the opportunity that the board might want to write state or federal grants to bring in more funding to the region. I think we found that the local fund that we have right now is taking much of our energy, right? So maybe still something for down the road, but certainly not something that there's been the need for at this moment in time. Evaluation, so program evaluation of the actual funded partners, and then looking at that system level change. What are the, have we created a better, more cohesive system? And just on the reporting functions, which I think has expanded into a much more comprehensive communication apparatus, but originally we were just thinking of what are those critical things of having annual reports, having performance reports for the funded programs, maintaining a website presence, and that back office administration thing like accounting and posting the meeting minutes, making sure complying with open meetings. So I just, reflecting back, it's been exactly 3 years, and I think, yeah, we're doing exactly what we kind of set out to do. If we look at revenue generation over a 3-year period, and I'm making a conservative projection for fiscal year 23 based on current trends that will at least be at 18 million. It's possible, depending on how early summer sales go, that it could be a little higher than that, but there's a pretty big jump between that first fiscal year and the second fiscal year. And even those estimates were greater than what was thought prior to the passing of the tax because of inflation being one thing. So as costs of things go up, costs of sales go up, and there was a lot of flow of things like stimulus money, which increased consumer spending. And on top of that, there was the Amazon law, which passed, which started tracking sales tax directly to IP address. So rather than doing that honor system thing at the end of the year when you file your taxes, they maybe did about $200 of online sales. Now it's being tracked precisely and being brought back to the county where you're making that purchase. So that increase of revenue to almost more than $18 million in revenue in the second fiscal year. We're anticipating probably close to that in this next fiscal year as well. So now let's overlay that with what has been budgeted for expenses. So, look at the first two fiscal years. We're under budgeting for what revenue is actually coming in. Healthy thing to do in the early years, right? Start to build a little bit of a fund balance and, but then one of the issues is in that first year, especially took a lot of times for programs to build capacity. So when you look at actual expenses, they're not really on par with what was budgeted. So you're looking at maybe much more of that fund balance building than what was anticipated based on budget
In COVID.
and COVID. But we're closing the gap. Okay, so based on fiscal year 22, see it's much closer to budget than it was in fiscal year 21. And so I kind of estimate for this year based on current numbers, I think we'll close that gap even more. We then break down the different types of expenses. So
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Back in there. So in our first year, we budgeted $9 to $12 million and it ended up about $4 million above that, right?
yes,
Is that is part of our fund balance, that continues to be our lag between budgeted expenses and what we're retaining.
yes.
Okay.
Jason, I'll ask a question. So based on your comment, the fund balance is stabilizing, going down, or at all continuing to grow?
I would say stabilizing. I think we're getting to a point of
Or
stabilization.
stabilization?
Yeah. So I would say in year 3, my hope would be that we'd be stable at the end of this fiscal year based on current. If we break down expense types, we have programmatic expenses, which really are the grants. And you'll see that's a large majority of what the actual expenses are. You can hardly see the operational expenses down at the bottom. So I created a different slide for that because it's so flat towards the bottom. It's hard to see in contrast with the large budget. So here I just want to kind of reflect that trend line. If we're looking at operational expenses over those first 3 years, and then kind of as a subset of those operational expenses, you're seeing how much of that is contractual staff. You'll see a steady trend line, and the contractual staff cost has been consistent with the operational expense trend. I want to just further then overlay that with the amount of full-time employee equivalents that the board gets if I break down the actual hours that are billed to the board. Okay, so it's not dedicated this exact number of dedicated positions, but when I add together all of the time that's been spent, in our first year, we had basically 2 full-time staff equivalent. In the second year, that rose to about 3.5, and now we're just above 5 full-time equivalent staff in terms of what services are received. If you look at that overlay with just the contractual staff expense, which is that black line, you can see the expenses on the left-hand side. I'm sorry, I have that reversed. So the black line is the full-time equivalency and the green is the amounts. And you'll see it's a very similar trend line there. So what the increased contractual staff amount is proportionate to the number of increased staff. It's not increased cost per hour that's making the big increase, it's increased staff.
Just out of curiosity, Jason, how many people make up, would you say, at any given time that 5 FTE? How many people?
I would say between back office operations and programmatic staff, probably 10.
Okay.
Yeah, because you'll maybe have accounting services that might be a couple hours a month,
Sure.
things like that.
Great, thank you.
But I also want you to emphasize the fact that those 10 equivalents are having to supervise all these programs now that we're funding and interface with that. So at the beginning, it was you and a few other helpers, right? And then as we've expanded, the staffing's expanded.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so the first year, we weren't really managing grant contracts. The first year, we set up the infrastructure of the grant program. Second year, we were managing 15 grant contracts. this third year, if you look at that, it's now 30 grant contracts. So if you think about just the execution of contracts, the compliance, the monthly reports that we receive and fill out, all those things, that becomes the main driver of increased staffing is just maintaining that level of compliance for the grant program. So this is a draft budget, and I'm going to go through and show you additionally what those trend lines look like if this budget were approved, but I'm going to walk through. So dedicated technology subscriptions, that would be a 10% increase over last year based on just estimated inflation costs to maintain the current subscription level for grant management software and other software that's used to manage the operations. Community engagement remains stable, legal counsel remains stable, travel is an increase. That one's bobbled back and forth. The first year we had budgeted 5, underspent. I went down on it. This year we're a little over. As many conferences that we were getting to participate in virtually are now having travel components. Look at mileage reimbursement, hotels. We were able to bring a board member with us to ACMI this year, which is very helpful. So we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to engage staff and board members in those professional development opportunities. Training cost at 5,000 remains consistent with past year budgets. I believe association dues. Last year we had 16,000 budgeted. That covers our ACMI membership. Was wanting to add on some smaller memberships like the National Association of Social Work. We also will have to renew our American Evaluation Association. We get a lot of journals from those things, and we get to stay up on evidence-based practices. You get a journal subscription with it. You get a lot of free trainings with it. So it keeps our training costs low when we maintain some of those professional memberships. Food and beverage previously was not a line item. We'd occasionally buy coffee for a stakeholder meeting and kind of just put it under community engagement. I felt from an accuracy of accounting perspective that it might be more appropriate just to have a specific line item for food and beverage, so that's tracked as a separate thing.
Now let's just go to Terry for the cookies, though.
Jerry's getting no reimbursement.
Get down to the table.
Contractual administrative services, I have at 645,000. I'm going to show you what that looks like on a full-time staff equivalent. See growth in just a minute as we get to that slide. And then insurance, about a 40% increase that I'm estimating there. Not because insurance premiums are on the whole going up 40%, but because our overall budget increases, and that's the main driver of our insurance cost. Is the more money we allocate in awards, the higher the insurance cost is to provide professional liability.
What is the insurance part?
It's professional liability and board and directors and officers insurance. So it just covers the board members on not only your functions as a board member, but also in the ways that you participate in the grant program to ensure there's no liability on that portion.
Thanks.
And then lastly, we had a line item last year for direct procurement around systems coordination. So things that we might put out a request for quotes on, for example, we hired a facilitator for the mental health pathways work. Put out a request for quotes, got a few quotes, picked a facilitator, hired that, didn't go through a whole grant program for that, right? Just something that was direct procurement. We also did that direct procurement with the communications specialist that we're now working with on the communications work group. I would like to continue that this year with the systems coordination, but what I heard in April from the board conversation is that we might need to have some of that type of funding available also for promotion awareness so that we can do vendor booths at certain events throughout the community to get the word out and not have to run it through a board process, but have the ability with the vision and boundaries established to put it through the procurement procedures of Region 1 Planning Council to give us flexibility to be a little more responsive when opportunities present themselves. And then the third area is data and evaluation. I'm proud of the work that we've done. I think we need to at some point hire a professional evaluator to assist us with a system capacity analysis of how we think the system has changed over the time that we've been funding these programs. I think on a program by program level, we do a good job with data collection, but I think some additional firepower would be very beneficial. So those are the areas that I think that some direct procurement could be best focused in. We've always done that with specific strategies in mind, so it's not like free for all. And so when we get into the strategic plan, that could set some of the parameters of how those funds would be expended.
I'm a little foggy still on the communication specialist that someone's been hired.
Yep.
For that. So to this line item point, has that person yet made any observations about something that we could or should be doing that we haven't yet begun to do?
Yeah, we essentially have a draft. Guidelines is really focused at how our funded programs get the word out. But yes, we have already an analysis and a first draft of that Chelsea and I are reviewing. What we'd like to do is send that back just to scrub it first, because there's some things that are obvious changes that need to be made. Then when we feel like it's pretty good, we'll send it out to the board members to get feedback.
Okay.
And the communications work group as well. Yeah. So then we look at the programmatic components. So $20 million a year to continue to maintain those core programs that fill those gaps in the community support system. That really keeps our core programs proportionate to what that revenue generation is every year. It doesn't overextend us on making commitments to things that we can't fund down the road. But we do have that question of what do we do with the remaining fund balance? And again, taking in feedback from board members, I've heard in multiple board meetings leading up to this, I'm proposing that we create a line item for special projects wherein we create a criteria for what might be called accelerator awards or programs that need a one-time injection of capital to essentially improve the system at large. So we have to really finalize our strategic plan first to identify what areas that would be. I think a good example of projects like that would be the Stepping Stones Counseling Center, where the board provided $500,000 of literal capital expenses to build a building. And that program in 3 years has become almost fully sustainable with their own revenue generation. So create an entire new service, doesn't need long-term continued funding support. It just needed that one-time support, and it was able to do something that improves the entire capacity of the system. So again, I'm not trying to get super detailed with that today, but I'm saying let's create the line item for it and let's define what the parameters are and how the board receives proposals for those types of projects.
But that line item, when our fund surplus is gone, would disappear.
I think that would be a way of thinking of it. It's really a way to spend down the fund balance in a strategic way. And you wouldn't anticipate that's going to be available forever.
I just throw out the idea of maybe in the future, looking at our revenue stream, our annual revenue stream, and designating a percentage of that specifically for more of those kinds of.
As a priority, rather than.
Well, as part of our process, as part of our, so rather than just saying, okay, $20 million a year is going to these cast in stone programs. And when this one-time dollar is gone, it's gone. What if we took, 2% and created like a rainy day fund or an intentional fund balance? So that we could continuously have those opportunities out in the community. So just something to think.
I think we talked about that one time before in the very beginning, correct me if I'm wrong. Keep something back in case there was a major flood or something of that nature, didn't we? Wasn't that talked about at one time? We wanted to keep it, so Wendy, I think you're on the right track. We wanted to keep some of that money on for a rainy day, and then in case of a flood. that'd be a
There are
rainy day.
downsides to that too, so.
I'm talking about a reserve.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have a reserve.
But what I would be concerned about is that it would almost have to be intentional to spend that money every year, because that fund could grow. I mean, we could end up with too much money in that line. And that would. That's what I would worry about. I mean, I think we'd have to really intentionally dedicate some dollars every year to these kind of projects.
Your line item of the 20 million, Jason, for program year 24-25 grant awards, that's solid or that's a swag?
I think that's solid. That's what we did this past year, but we do have in that, a couple of capital projects that will fall off after the first year, so there will be the ability, you know, should everything be shown as successful, to maintain all of the current awards and have a little bit of flexibility to fund an additional gap in service.
So the sales tax revenue slide you put up was about 18 million a year.
Yeah,
So just taking those two alone,
let me go forward and I'll show you what
Yeah.
it looks like. So this would be projected revenue on a conservative estimate. We've now added in the additional fiscal year. And so, yeah, we would be estimating to go for the first time significantly over the sales tax revenue for one fiscal year.
Right.
Right, but 20 million of that's kind of where you want to be, and 10 million of that is really being strategic about how to spend into the fund balance. And then I just kind of overlay that with how those break down in programmatic expenses again versus the administrative operational expenses. That's what that would look like. And again, trend line, I'm just trying to show trend lines because our growth has been incremental. The tick up in overall operational expenses would be adding in those additional components of direct procurement for promotion and awareness and data and evaluation. But the staffing would really just maintain steady growth to kind of be able to operate these additional programs that would be funded. So looking at something close to 7 full-time staff equivalent. And then, I don't know if that fully answered your question, Dr. Gorski, but I wanted to kind of show at least.
well,
All of that
I think
before.
so. I'm also thinking about the budget's going to need to be approved, and so trying to think of questions that are going to come up from those who will be approving the budget. What is that money in there for, and how's it going to be used? And what's your fund balance? All the questions that.
Yeah. So I think so take out the $10 million out of your mind momentarily. You have a healthy budget of probably what you should have based on the revenue generation.
Exactly.
The 10 million is specifically regarding strategic ways to appropriate some of the fund balance. It has been advised by legal counsel that, you know, you should not have a fund balance that's too large, because then it gets to a point where you're out of alignment with the intent of why you're collecting tax.
that's right.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
There's political realities too, that we've already talked about, but I do appreciate what Wendy was talking about earlier that we've discussed before. And I don't know how we can do it long-term, but it seems to me there would be a benefit after we get a handle on the data and evaluation piece that you put in. There would be some kind of benefit to figuring out how to have a certain amount of money designated for innovative, strategic initiatives with a view toward their own self-sustaining potential.
Good idea.
So that, because our ultimate goal is ecosystem.
Right.
And to the extent that we can find and promote innovators, there might be some ways that we can do that, that really don't necessarily, I'm thinking out loud now, that really don't necessarily fit into our mode, but it's more so our impact, our support in terms of maybe them helping to get grants or whatever to innovate, as long as they're helping us get our comprehensive ecosystem together.
Yeah.
I think there's benefit to putting some energy, if not money, into that idea.
And, you know, it just occurred to me, the other possibility, and now I'm really just thinking out loud, is at the end of each fiscal year, at least so far, we have had unspent funds for one reason or another. Maybe at the end of fiscal year, you sweep those unspent funds into a designated kind of incubator, you know,
Yeah,
fund.
yeah, so
So just things to think about.
out of like some of the other mental health boards that have been operating for longer will say, if you award $10 million in expenditure-based grants, you're probably gonna spend $9 million. 90% is often because it's reimbursement, so to get the exact amount spent is often hard. So to your point, then you have maybe $2 million that you will, out of 20 that you awarded that didn't actually get spent, that you could re-put into next year's budget in different ways.
So in 1 year's budget, the special project award line item of $10 million, the implication of that is to deal with the fund balance.
Yeah.
And during the course of that year, identify as yet right now unknown potential projects that would tap into that.
Right.
I'm concerned we all can understand that. I'm wondering the optics of that. You know, budgets that I've dealt with in my lifetime where there was that amount of money that there was no specific thing for it, would tend to draw a lot of questions. So the ability to explain that and use examples, for instance, I'm just struggling a little bit with how it's going to wash over your colleagues.
The thing that I think about is Dick's vision, which is building sort of a supported residential hub for people with mental health problems. You know, that is a vision that requires a lot of capital. And somewhere between that money being seed money and that being seed money for other grants or things, it gives us some opportunity then to do some innovative things.
I think we'd have to start communicating, you know, something bigger than just programmatic.
Yes,
I
agree.
Kind of issues. We would have to talk about the fact that we are looking for specific housing. I mean, if we're gonna be doing, and someone would have to come forward with the proposal, right? Because someone would have to be responsible for all of the operation of that particular kind of program.
How many years you can carry over the surplus funds?
There's no, I mean,
No, the money doesn't lapse at all.
It's in our bank account.
no, it's in a dedicated,
No,
it's in a dedicated fund.
it's a dedicated one.
And I suppose if the referendum wouldn't pass, you know, at the end of the 5-year term, that money would still be there to be spent.
Yeah.
Until it was over.
How does I'm sorry,
No,
how does the budget compare with other mental health boards of other counties like DuPage, Kane, or
McHenry, yeah.
Yeah, McHenry is the most comparable, but a lot of all those boards that you're talking about are operating on property tax. A more comparable entity that's similar would actually be the Children's Service Fund in St. Louis. which they have a 1/4% sales tax for the entire St. Louis area. I think it's
Missouri side.
county.
Yeah.
And they just awarded, for example, they did 3-year awards for their core programs and just committed $150 million over 3 years to maintain their programs. So that's a little, I guess we'd be in between that and the largest mental health board that's operating on a property tax, which is going to be at about 10 million a year.
What did they take in St. Louis or?
I think it's somewhere in the range of 50 million a year.
Wow.
Well, but St. Louis.
Well, I'm not speaking out in any way against it. I think the idea of the surplus needs to be dealt with that. Mary Ann might have said, I think it just requires a lot of communication about the idea behind it. How the surplus built up, it's there. The board is interested in transformational, innovative work. It gives us the leeway. I'm just trying to think of it from the other challenge perspective, challenging it without there being right now a specific project for it. I'm not saying, I don't think that's insurmountable. I just think it just needs to be explained.
Well, I think, the county board is certainly aware of it from the beginning, obviously. But I also, right, Tim?
Yeah.
You're very balanced and most of the members are. But what I really think that, like Jason is giving us a 3-year review. The first year, like any kind of tax revenue that, it just is impossible to spend the whole thing right away. So, I think the fact that we've made so much progress is really the testimony for our upcoming budget.
And it would be interesting just to, what percentage of the 2020 referendum was spent in the first year, second year now? And I think your diagrams are showing that, but just showing, in a statistical way that we are, 50% was spent in the first year. So we had that carryover. Then, 70% was spent. And now we're like at 95%.
Yeah, we have the graph, we have all the data that we use to create the charts. We could easily create, identify the percentages for each year as well.
My brain finds it easy.
Well, practically speaking, first of all, I think it's a great idea. And I think that, again, to the extent that we can figure out how to operationalize what you plan, is, I think will be in good stead. And I think that at some point, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but at some point, we have to our detractors, or not detractors, those who might be especially assertive in their inquiries, will have to, at some point, in my opinion, express where else do you see this accountability, this type of sort of strategic, intentional ways to make sure that we're tracking things and that we're bringing stabilization. Because quite frankly, I don't know of any other entity in our area that is doing this type of thing. Transparency, intentionality, staying so close to the mission and all those types of things.
Absolutely.
I think there are some good comparable type programs, even the Illinois Healthcare Transformation Grants is an accelerator program meant to do transformational projects that are not long-term, not needing long-term operational funding, but creating collaborations that might have capital expenses and other expenses to get something new started that doesn't exist. I just didn't think it was appropriate before we even did our strategic planning to start bringing in those specificities. So that was the only kind of reason I understand. I appreciate the feedback that, at this moment, and just trying to create a mechanism through which we can do some of the things we've been talking about.
Is the number too big? Should it be 5,000? 5 million rather than 10 million?
I think 10 million, if you did that for 3 years, would get you to a healthy balance.
Well, there's no question about that, but I'm just thinking where politics are such that we, as we're doing with our total amount, we're growing into and should we grow into the special project budget based again on what it is that we hear from the community rather than project number that we make up.
Wow. I think we're doing good just because we didn't have that line item in there last year, so that just
Right,
helped answer a lot of questions anyway.
yes, I agree with that, Jim.
So we could, I think, as long as we keep ironing out the details, I think we'll be fine.
And good to hear.
And communicate.
Yeah, and once we put this, I mean, and again, we haven't got to the strategic plan yet. Once we sort of lay that out, a lot of things I think will be explained and easily understood.
So this is a voting item.
Okay. We will need a motion to approve the fiscal year 2024 budget.
So move.
Second.
Okay, I've got Jim
Who's an
and
official
Terry.
second?
Terry. Well, I will
No,
hear.
It's gonna be.
Yeah, Dick spoke up, high in favor of Terry. Yeah.
Any further discussion, questions?
Just for thinking of the future and that eloquent way you said those who might aggressively question the contractual administration services percentage of total relating to previous years has simply grown with the total magnitude of the budget as a fair statement.
Yep, we've always just been right under 2.5%. And that includes all of the functions of operational administrative portions.
Not in the budget, or excuse me, in the minutes.
That's gonna get the biggest questions out of anything.
Well,
That's why I want
and-
that, one in the minutes.
And what's the profit monitor that looks at how well organizations are functioning, how much they're spending on administrative expenses? You know, they look at places that spend 10% of their revenue on administration as good. This is phenomenal.
Well, this is not even competitive with the other mental health boards that take in so much less revenue than we take in. I mean, their administrative costs are,
Are way higher.
yes.
And I just have to give accolades to Jason and Kelsey and the staff. I just think you're outstanding. And
We all agree with that.
Here, here.
Yes, I'm so deserving of our,
In our one.
okay, we have a
Yes.
motion and we have a second. And so I will take roll call for the approval of the budget. Dr. Copeland,
Yes.
Dr. Jardine,
Yes.
Dr. Gorski.
Yes.
Dick Cooner,
Yes.
Wendy Larson Bennett.
yes.
Kim Nevers.
Yes.
Linda Sanford, Mohammed Yunus.
Yes.
Mariana Body, yes. Budget approved.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And moving on, we will be into our discussion items.
Okay, so we'll continue the presentation. I went the wrong direction. So board foundations, a lot of times we do strategic planning without ever going back and saying, how are we doing on our mission and our vision and our values? And I think that is the foundation of the strategic plan. So we did what's called an empowerment evaluation, which is the board evaluating itself on those critical foundations. And here's what we found. So I'll just read, the board's vision is, another way of articulating that is our hope for the community. And the vision is, we see a community where residents are knowledgeable about mental health and have access to high quality mental health and substance abuse services when and where they need them. And 100% of the board members said that they believe this vision had been moderately achieved and that the vision remains inspiring. So I'm just going to stop at each one of these. If you do have any comments you want to add for any of these, This one, I don't have any questions about it. I think it's pretty clear what the board thinks about the vision and that we should stay course. On the mission, this is, so if that's what we want to see, this is what we're doing about it. The board is an appointed group of community leaders who are passionate about improving mental health and substance abuse services in Winnebago County, and coordinate them through planning, funding, evaluation, and communication. 100% of the board members believe that the mission still fits the needs of the community. And if we look at how board members felt that the board was adhering to this mission, we see that most board members said very much adhering to it. One said extremely adhering to it, and one said moderately adhering to it. So there was the option of not adhering to it, and nobody selected that option. Just pause for a second, you know, you don't have to disclose what you answered necessarily, but if anybody wants to make a comment to the mission, you're welcome to.
Well, I think this is our strength. We have talked about this and what the effect has been over time with many of the other mental health boards, there's been mission drift. And for us to stay both passionate about and dedicated to keeping our mission going with what we have done, I think improves the possibility of the community seeing this as a worthwhile venture, go beyond the upcoming firewall.
Thank you. Any other feedback on this?
I agree.
Kind of, I don't remember how I answered it. This may not even be germane to this question. If I said vary, it may only be because of what I assume may be a discussion later about reactive versus proactive, that maybe the next step in fulfilling the mission is to become more proactive. If I was thinking that deeply about it, I might have said vary. I don't remember.
But I agree with you in looking at that. That's the divergence in my own head, which is, I think we are in a reactive sense right on time. But then the question becomes, what's the proactive step? And I know I'm fuzzy about that. Just as we're looking at programs going, where does this fit? You know?
Well, then there's a budget line item in there now that $10 million budget line.
Or fuzzy in my brain.
Or you're wondering.
Yeah. Okay, great thoughts, and we'll have opportunity for that part of the discussion to get incorporated in a strategic plan. Values, so, yeah.
Can everybody see the screen okay? Should the curtains need to be lowered at all? I know there's like a slight glare, but can everybody see it okay? Yes, okay, I just want to make sure. Sorry.
There's horse on this side.
I see no glare from here, so.
Yeah, see, there's like- So, okay.
Yeah, we can put those down.
We're okay.
Okay.
That's good.
I don't have the values in front of me, so I'm not going to read each one. I can certainly pull up any of those that we need to, but the values each have a definition with them. General values are wellness, awareness, collaboration, transparency, diversity, client-centeredness, intersectionality, trauma-informed accessibility. 100% of the board members believe that these values continue to capture the motivations of work that we do. When we asked, what specific, for each value, how is the board exemplifying that? Once again, we saw in most cases, it's extremely or very, a few that were moderately, and one, I think that maybe just had one response of slightly, and that was on transparency. On diversity, I see that was 50-50 between moderately and then very or extremely. So I certainly want to open this up, and I'll say one of the comments, which I think is on another slide, is that one of the considerations could be adding a more prominent statement about cultural competency to the values. I believe the values of diversity speaks to cultural humility, but not cultural competency specifically. But with just making that comment on what the responses were, would any board members like to comment on any of these values specifically in terms of, you know, how they are meaningful or where there could be improvement and trying to integrate them into our work?
I wish we had more discussion at the board level about the programs that we're evaluating. I feel like I'm responding to program proposals sort of in a vacuum. It would be useful to be able to talk to other board members and, you know, add, because there are things that I know about and there are lots of things that I know nothing about. And I'd like your experience and education to inform my decision making.
What are the disadvantages of open meetings? You know, we can't, you know, get too many people.
I
More
understand.
than 3 of us,
Yeah.
or more than 2 of us.
But I found that difficult.
I agree.
You know, there are, you know, when we're working in, let's say, the medical area, I want to talk to you, Bill. You know stuff that I don't know.
Or new stuff.
Well, but hey, you've forgotten more than I ever know about certain things. And I want that benefit when I'm evaluating certain things that are happening in sort of a medical scenario, you know? And everybody brings their unique point of view. There's got to be a way for us to talk more deeply as we're evaluating things. There's one program that I had a lot of input in this year because I'm intimately familiar with it. And then it makes me wonder, what don't I know about some of these other programs that if I knew would enhance or alter my opinion, you know? The horse riding one. Yeah, last year I hated it. I thought it was terrible. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was a ridiculous expenditure of money. I was opposed to it. And it's awesome. Education. You know?
Well, kudos for bringing it up. We may be jumping ahead, but I mean, it's okay. The idea of being in a vacuum perfectly characterized how I feel. And there's so many of you in this room who know so much more about the mental health landscape than I do. I'm inclined to look at them. I'm better now than I was 3 years ago, but I'm inclined to look at them and go, I really don't know. Does this make sense from a, you know, system of care perspective? So, and there's other more, and frankly, I thought this year of an example, we're probably going to get into the ability of staff to help us in the future. That was, I think, one of the things we maybe would be talking about. For instance, I'm looking at the administrative expense on some of the budgets of these things, some of which are a few percent, some were 25–30%.
Right.
I don't have any awareness of what's appropriate. Is that okay? Does that make sense for that organization? Does it not? So there's things like that arise when I'm reviewing them in a vacuum. I don't know. I make comments in the notes, but I don't know whether that's a judgment that's disqualifying or I just don't know that.
But I think a lot of this, because of our scoring rubric, that we all are consistent. And we can compare the programs we're evaluating with what are the administrative costs overall. And there are some outliers, and that's good to question that. And that's how I think a lot of our work plan amendments with these agencies and programs come from the input that the evaluators have given on their evaluations. I really do. So all the doubt you have, it's really helpful.
So to that point, I think that it's a double-edged sword. I understand and I agree with the whole vacuum piece, because that's how I feel every time I'm in it. But the benefit, I think what you just said is clear. The whole point of having a board like this where everybody is not a mental health care provider is that we can give input without the influence, because if we were doing a medical thing, I would just go, well, whatever Bill says, that's my boss,
Right.
type of thing, but because I'm a pastor, I'm looking at it from a particular angle that might not to a professional make sense, but because I'm dealing with people who have lived experience, I'm coming from a different angle, and I think that's what makes us strong. That's what makes the board as effective as it is. There might be ways that we can address what you're talking about, but I do think that it is a strength that I don't have the influence sometimes of the people who might know better than I do.
And sometimes that isn't always the best either, because you know too much about it, or you're kind of biased about how the program
Right.
should be run. Where from, you know, a non-mental health professional can look at the benefits of a program, and if your family needed that service or whatever, you could look at it from a different perspective rather than.
Right.
Yeah, I think you got a very good point. But right now, the way we evaluate our grant proposal is by each person, that's.
Yeah, right.
And that person might not have the expertise in other area. Like psychologist, a doctor,
That's what we're saying.
budget issues. And at SAMHSA, what they used to do, they used to have a group discussion. People of 5 people got together and evaluated the application.
Right.
So everyone getting their own, if my area is a budget, I look at the budget more closely. Some psychologists there looking the program more closely. And doctors there, legal attorneys are there, looking other aspects. So that way, we have different perspectives, people looking from different angle. And then you get a better product on it.
We would love to do that, but we're not by law allowed to do that, to have the group discussion around, because then it's a public meeting,
Why would
open meeting.
But I wonder if we couldn't, maybe once we've done the individual evaluation, then sort of present where things were and ask questions like,
yeah,
is 25% for this program an outlier? And then maybe ask people then based on having your questions answered, or rather than it being like a free-for-all,
yeah, good
targeted questions, then let people go back and, you know, if, like I'll go back to the equine program. If I would have understood more in depth what the benefits of that program were, I would have voted differently.
No, what we really ended up saying is, number one, the collective mind is always going to be better than a single brain. But the brainless open meeting law prevents us from doing what you're all talking about. We can't form the collective mind, you know, to do this in a way, unless we sort of create a situation where this gets to be a regular meeting, and that
Then it's public.
exactly.
I mean,
So,
you can do that.
Pardon?
I said you can.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that.
Absolutely.
The only thing that would be different is people understand that as we participate, this is what it is. And, you know, and so that we go with that.
But
But
to
we're
do a
absolutely,
meeting that to account for all the hours that we put in,
yeah,
evaluating, are we gonna spend a day and a night here, or, you know,
No,
I mean, you look at the practical side of it too, yeah.
I mean, we could have public meetings that don't include, the administrative, you know, just like the city and the county do with committee and caucus meetings. They're meetings that are allotted, they're still public, you know, but, you just like say we're gonna schedule a discussion meeting in the meeting room at the library. It's like, long as it's listed publicly, you know, it's not a violation of the open meeting act. So it's, you know, just like another committee, before we go to the county board, we have committee meetings and caucus meetings. And so that's where most of our work gets done, so.
See, I would feel the way I attack the evaluation process is, first of all, I have to, you know, really read it through and think about it and realize exactly what, you know, what the program is all about. But then I go back and we have so many different components. You know, do they have compliance? Do they have the risk policy? Do they have a consumer feedback loop? Do they have, and all of the above? I mean, that in itself is, I think
Still a lot of work.
we could get through that part of it on our own.
Right,
You know, the checking the boxes,
Right.
it's the
It's the
programmatic,
It's the
yes,
programmatic
yeah. Mhm.
and the implementation.
Well, I think the other thing that would help me, and I think you're probably gonna get to this anyway, is what is the appropriate role of staff in giving us any feedback at all on a question we have? And I, Jason and Nicole are really good at not sharing whatever their personal feelings are. I've tried to never put them in a position necessarily of pressing them on that. But let's say if there was a way, let's take it's not a silly example of the administrator cost, but if I felt comfortable calling one of them and say, hey, I'm reviewing, you all see all of them. I don't see all of them. I see this percentage of administrative cost, seems off to me. What do you think as you look at the entire landscape? You know, I think you're onto something. I think that probably is higher than we said. I know they're diligently attempting and doing a great job not influencing us in any way. But is there any way that there's a middle ground where they can give us feedback and guidance about what we're observing to say, we're on the right track, we're not on the right track, yes, that's a credible observation, no, it's not. That to me would be one other resource to bounce off without an open meeting type situation where it would be some guidance, because I have questions a lot of time, but I don't call you guys.
Oh, I do, I call.
Yeah.
I try not to, because they're trying not to influence.
Well, I mean.
I call them all the time too.
We get calls from all of you. We're all adamant, you all call us. But that's our.
That's what our goal is.
So we.
That's all.
3 years ago was we kind of looked at to what other mental health boards were doing. We picked what works for us best. I think what worked for us best 3 years ago might not be the same reality of what needs to work best for us now. We had to also face the reality, I think, of 3 years ago of not knowing how many grant requests we get, how much the amounts would be. In an open meeting, you can't like sit there and do that type of like, well, if we shave this one down here, you gotta try to get to your amount, right? And those that do their grant decisions in open meetings sometimes are doing the award before they set the budget and go to their governing body to ask for the budget. So they're preempting it, then creating their budget based on what they want to award. Our process, we're getting the budget amount and then trying to figure out, but I think even if we're looking at renewals, we can be a little bit more intelligent now about what we can estimate that amount's gonna be year to year if everything gets renewed, and probably could find a hybrid where there's some component of more conversation in a group setting. So that's good, really great feedback that we can now reevaluate. What other models did we maybe look at before that we weren't thinking would be a good fit then, that maybe we do incorporate
We
some?
really do need to do
components?
that. Because again, otherwise what we're really saying is silos. We're all in silos and that's not for the benefit of like why we're a collective board. You know, we don't, I mean, each of us brings different gifts to this issue. And so like what we need to do is create a forum where you know, the different views and gifts of people get to be part of like what our fulfilling our mission, because that's really what we're trying to do. How do we do this best?
And one of the questions that isn't being asked, at least in my head, is, well, on some level it is, but I'd like it more explicit. how well does CCRT fit with our values, our list of values as it's being implemented? Now we have a little bit of a track record. Now let's weigh what's going on the ground against this. You know, one of the wonderful things I think that has been facilitated by the staff has been the collaboration amongst applicants and grantees. But I think there are more questions that we can be asking that go back to our values. And that's something that I think we can ask together.
So it sounds like the values we're good with. It's just how we operationalize those through our strategic plan. So let's get back to that.
Yes.
And Nicole will have more about the grants program when we get to that part of the strategic plan. And I'm gonna move on to our operating principles here. So these are more of that operational component of how we think, what are some of our guiding principles to how we, I think this kind of becomes more important on the staff side, how we operate. And so 100% of the board members believe that the current principles do continue to guide our work. And we see here in terms of like, how does this reflect how you believe that the contracted staff at Region 1 actually operates in terms of evidence-based, process-oriented, outcomes-informed, the way that the board funds with equity, a sense of urgency, but also being emergent and flexible, and then the degree to which we've been network-driven. Here again, we do see that there was a lot of that extremely very, a few moderate, but I would like to open it up for any conversation as it relates to our operating principles that.
I have a concern,
Yeah.
concern about evidence-based.
Hmm.
You know, because we've established that we want evidence-based, but what does evidence-based mean? It means replicating here what somebody else has done in the way of research. And if you don't replicate it in the same way, you don't have the right to say that you're getting the same outcomes. And some of like what I read in some of the applications is, the question I have is like, okay, you mentioned an evidence-based, but where do I find on your staff the person or people who have the skill sets that were established in the research? Okay, because if they don't, then what we have to do is bring that to them. And I think there's a need for that. It's basically within the system that we need to look at some of the like what people are saying. I mean, just an issue, for example, like case management. It's kind of like, okay, everybody wants to do it. And they say we're evidence-based, but I would like to see, a little bit more evidence of kind of like, okay, what study are you picking? What resource are you drawing from that this is the way that we're going to walk in our agency? And so I think, for example, that our system has a need for bringing some like training centers that are very connected to the evidence-based practices, that we make them available to people within the.
So you're saying double down on this operating principle and
Yeah.
make it part of all.
Yeah.
Tim was next, I think. And
I want to say something about that. Evidence-based, what does it mean? Based on what evidence? It's study done in Denmark. Consumers are different, the researchers are different. Their value system is different, their culture is different. How can we replicate that in Winnebago County? We got a different clientele, different people, different system. So anything is evidence-based in Denmark cannot be replicated here. So we have to be very careful. But we say that best practices, same thing. Best means is the end of it. No improvement can be done. And evidence-based is a misnomer, based on what? I mean, say, or something done in New York, the consumers was different, the researcher was different, their perspective was different. There's no way we can replicate what's in there in a Winnebago County. So we have to be very careful how we see that.
But Mohammed, when you're talking about evidence-based services or practices, and Dick used case management.
No, but that practices might not be applicable here. That was applicable in Denmark.
Yeah,
It's a cultural humility issue as a matter of fact. One thing done in one culture cannot be replicated in another culture.
well, that's
And that has
culturally,
been-
and you're talking
That
about
has
the,
been done in that area, and they say that is a misnomer, evidence based on what? Something done in Denmark or India can be applicable here.
but see, I kind of disagree with that in the fact that case management, using that as an example, it can be done in, if you're using evidence-based practice, then you're gonna provide that service the same way, whether it's in Denmark, Rome, or
No,
Winnebago County.
there are a lot of variables, I mean.
Pardon
And
me?
you have to take that into consideration.
Well, definitely, I mean, taking into consideration all the cultural variables and just the norms and what kind of illness they're dealing with, but that service alone, it can be
Let me give you
replicated.
one example. Eye contact. Here shows that you are a confident person. The same thing in India, it means you are challenging me. You are
Okay,
challenging the
I see what
authority.
you're saying.
I mean, the two different, same thing. But eye contact here is that person full confidence, and there it means you are trying to challenge the authorities. It's starting with the home, you are looking into eye with your parent, it means defining. Same in school, you can ask question, you are asking question means you are challenging my scholarship.
Okay,
So here, if you don't ask, means you are dumb. You must ask, I mean. So it's a different thing, I mean. I was just reading an article on that. It says that you have to be very, very careful when you use the word evidence based. Based on what? Okay, I'm sorry.
yeah, okay.
Tim?
I kind of agree with both, Dick and,
Mohammed,
Muhammad. Just because, you know, how can we be innovative if we only rely on evidence-based, but the other side, I can't get it to comprehend it, but this is another question I get from our board members. How are we policing mental health programs and even the programs that aren't receiving grant funding? And, you know, I don't get it, but I'm bringing it up at the board meeting. And it's just something hard to do, and that's something that they want us to do. I don't know if that's something that's, they want us to be more like the health department with the mental health resources. I mean, mental health agencies and like the health department, police restaurants and things of that matter. And,
oh, I see where you're going, yeah.
yeah.
Well, what's interesting to me about that is, unlike policing a restaurant,
Mhm.
which, you know, here's the list, here's the checklist of health code violations, and here's your place, and here's 100% compliance, you know, and it's, mental health is not that
I
simple.
know.
But one of the more informative moments for me was sitting down with the CCRT team and listening to the boots on the ground people talking about, well, we responded to, I don't remember the number, I'm gonna say 12 calls. 12 individuals. But that's only this much of the iceberg of what went into those 12 calls. In talking to the actual providers, it was one call generated like 96 contacts with somebody. And remembering, I think in our, at least in my civilian brain, I have this idea that you're having a problem, I'm referring you to Ed. Ed is the mental health professional you're taking care of. I can check you off my list. Not so much. That isn't how it works. It means, yes, I tried to connect you to Ed. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. Maybe now you're living in Ed's basement. I don't know. But that single phone call, that single point of contact isn't enough for us to have real information about how well the program is working. And that's where outcomes become, the process becomes part of the answer to that question.
So, Tim used the word policing. You can police a program relative to what it said it was going to do. So
Right.
I may have been a moderate on the outcomes informed. I don't remember.
Okay.
Because, and the thought struck me as we prepared for today. I don't feel at all, and even when I've reviewed some projects, I don't feel at all like I have a good handle on whether these groups are not are hitting their outcomes. And I wondered when I was doing this, and this is, I hope we're brainstorming and open, I understand that, but would it make any sense for every single meeting for staff to bring a couple of the funded programs here with their summary of, this is stepping stones, this is how much they've gotten from us in year 1, 2, 2, 3. This is how much they've expended. These are the outcomes they said they would achieve. As of this point in time, this is what they've done. And if there's a mismatch in what they say they've done and what they've actually been able to do, and we question them, and these are the barriers they've had, and the board may say, great, they're on track, or the board may say, you know what, Jason, Nicole, could you circle back to us in 2 or 3 months with talking to them again and seeing if they made progress? That's where I feel like I'm unaware of what's happening. So every month, the staff do a couple, maybe 5 minutes of program. It wouldn't have to be some lengthy thing with key metrics and how they're performing relative to how they said they were doing.
So we do, yeah, we have some compliance strategies and the things. So this is a great segue into that once we get to the programmatic stuff. I'll also say what I'm hearing are a couple of bullet points we need to have in our proposal that we put out for an evaluator, because I think we're talking about the, policing, sure, but what is it, how do we evaluate the adherence to what a program said they were going to do? And adherence to a model, whether that's a best practice that needs to be modified for our community, or it's something that gets implemented in the same way it's been done. So I hear what you're saying. This is good feedback, and the compliance one, hold on to that because we'll get into that.
Okay.
And the numbers alone don't tell the story. So the 12 contacts don't tell the story of what the program is.
The number of clients.
So the one suggestion for adding an additional, I don't know if it necessarily needs to be a new value, or maybe incorporating into our current values the importance of cultural competence, both into the values and the operating principles. And I think that could certainly be probably incorporated into some of the existing statements.
Right.
So we'll look at that. And then lastly was board's desire to be more engaged, less engaged, or the same level of engaged in some of the, what I would say probably the areas where board members have the most engagement, which is the grant reviews, the site visits, the board meetings, and participation in community networks that are related to our work. And most of the answers were maintained except for site visits, where the predominant feeling was to be more involved. So I think Nicole did a great job making sure we got out to all of the 30 programs this past year. I think for most of them, we had at least one board member, but we'll definitely try to schedule those in the future in a way that more board members can participate in those. I know on the staff side, we got to go to a lot of them, and it was helpful for us to also see programs in action, interact with staff, hear the stories of what's going on a daily basis. Is there any feedback that anybody wants to add to this in terms of these 4 areas of core engagement, I would say?
And I just have a comment, and maybe it's because I feel, I communicate so much with the staff and Jason, given that I'm the chair of this board. But one thing I would encourage all the board members, Bill, your concerns about compliance and getting up to date on, how's this agency done in the past, even for evaluating a renewal. If you call, Nicole Bennett can cite, she can either send the compliance report, because it's available, the information that maybe you don't know about, and that we don't take the time at the board meetings to have presented, it's available anytime you want it. So I would encourage you all to take advantage of that, because I think it would be even harder if you didn't know how that program did the year before, or if they're meeting their mark in whatever. So that's my only comment.
I promised I was not gonna call out specific board members and what their responses were, but I have to know who asked for more meetings.
I would say it's
Does
probably
anybody
me.
want to volunteer, Terry?
I will tell you right now, I know I did.
Meetings?
I did, because this is one of the reasons why, because I think we have more questions when we leave than we have answers.
Okay.
And that's one of my biggest concerns.
I love this, so that's passion and interest,
Well-
and
And Mary Ann, it has nothing to do with anybody here personally, but I just think there needs to be more communication. We come in, we get in, okay, 35, 45 minutes, we're out the door. What did we accomplish?
Something that we might consider, and I understand open meetings, blah, blah.
Well,
What?
not blah, blah.
you've given up the title.
Really?
So no longer responsible. But it occurs to me, maybe what we need is 2-person subcommittees that are assigned to certain of our grants, so that we develop a relationship with some of our grantees, and then we can come back to our board and report on our observations of what's happening. Like, Nicole and I went over to Jubilee, and now I'm dropping clothes off there on a regular basis. I think Deja is unbelievable.
Yes.
And it's like those sort of connections. Then when you're asking questions about what are we spending money in at Jubilee Center, now I can explain to you what the difference is.
I think that's not a bad idea.
So that
I
might
mean,
be something for us to talk
So like a
about.
board champion, that's a liaison to a direct program.
Yeah, and it might be nice if we did it in pairs or something, just cause different perspectives, just something to think about.
Before that. So, Nicole, you're setting up the site business was wonderful. I like going. I really did. I tried to get to as many as I could.
Absolutely, yes.
And, my biggest thing was, it was a dog and pony show. But my question was to them, what are your failures and how did you handle it? Because they all have failures. We all have failures, Now, how did you handle it? That's what my biggest question was. And those were the people who, they were honest. Honesty is integrity. And when they were honest with me, now you know what, when I see their proposal come back in, they were honest with me. I'm gonna, give them a little bit different consideration.
Yeah, and
I
And yeah, just so though, that might be a way to enhance organization.
Thank you, that's great feedback. And I know of another board that does something like that, so keep that in mind as we look at.
Not so that we're getting in their hair. That's the other thing.
They really appreciate the feedback from the organizations, because I think we made it to all but 3, and the 3 would be coming up soon that we could go potentially in the fall, but the feedback overall was people really appreciated the fact that the board is so engaged that they wanted to visit, that they had not had funders visiting before. So people to truly try to explain, like, I think Dr. Gorski is a new play therapist at YSN, for example, like the time people took to truly make sure you understood, like, what was the modality, how is it practiced, what time of day is it practiced, who is it practiced with, to really show what it's like to have the client perspective, in addition to really explaining their programming. I think they all did an amazing job. They were very nervous, you could tell, once they got there, because they don't have funders who are that engaged to be able to come and see them. So I think overall, organization perspective, people loved it, so.
See, and I think Timothy needs to hear that. That is different. Nicole's comments that most funders don't go to the agency, they show up. And so consequently, our monitoring of what's going on and our efforts to get information regarding what's going on is greater than what you typically find in terms of going on with the board. So, I think our mothers and fathers in the county board need to hear that. The culture of this board is dedicated to knowing what's going on at a customer or client level, like within the community. I mean, one of the things that, at least for me, is always the try this here, is the organization lined up to do something with the client or to them. And so that's, I mean, for me, that's basic, that's, so that's, those are the things that we're taking the temperature of what's going on within the agencies that we're funding. And so consequently, that's a different model by just in and of itself.
We also were able to see some programs that really weren't functioning well. Once you got there and realized and the staff was not very positive, and kind of negativity about the client base and whatever. So that was, I didn't go, but I got the feedback on that.
Well, that concludes our empowerment evaluation or board foundations. Now we're going to go into the actual strategic planning. This was related to how, well, let me just cover real quick, just brief feedback on this. We did hear from board members that this was a question about how well are our reports and documents being made available to you or understandable to you. And between very accessible and somewhat accessible, I'm appreciating that nobody felt that our documents and reports were not accessible at all, but there were a lot of somewhat accessible. So I just, if anybody wants to comment on if there's anything that you feel, and maybe some of this has already been in what you're saying is just more programmatic data, more compliance data. If there's other things that we can be doing with our reports and documents to make them more easily available, or I think Chelsea does a great job with our meeting packets, but if there's things that say, hey, if you did this, it'd be so much more helpful for me, let us know that as well.
I know, some of it is just I'm old.
Something that's what?
That I'm old and accessing things like on my computer, it like takes me.
Print reports, mail them to Wendy's house.
I'm trying not to ask you to do that. Yeah.
I like this.
Okay.
Old dirt. I'm old as dirt. So I understand that's my issue. I ultimately get there. It took me 40 minutes on my phone to get to whatever it was I needed to do, but I did it. So somewhat accessible.
Fair enough.
A function of staff is technical assistance, so if there is ever a question you have about anything, okay, maybe. Then maybe I'll call you at 8 AM next morning. But yeah, don't ever feel that you cannot ask any of us to help you with anything. We can navigate it and figure it out.
Well, we appreciate all of you.
All right, we'll keep moving. Just to note that the last one was that board members did want to have more opportunities for your own continuing education, so. I don't know if anybody wants to make a comment about that, but I think I understand the intent of that, and I think we could probably, knowing that, figure out how we can. We get a lot of stuff, I'll be honest. You would not want us forwarding everything to you.
No.
But maybe if we could establish a handful of topics or something and just share some key things out, we can, or is it, anybody want to make a comment on that though, I guess, in terms of like specific things that you feel would be a topic of focus on that type of continuing education opportunities or trainings that you would want to see shared or participate in? I know that Mohammed went to the legal counsel that we hire, offers some things on open meetings and stuff like that. Mohammed, was that a helpful experience?
Yes, a very good one. And I brought some handouts that they gave us in the meeting. And I did give you a copy of that. If anyone wants to see that.
could share it.
Yeah, it has copy.
Yeah, you could probably scan them and share what we.
I'd just like to know what other regional boards are doing, in Northern Illinois and,
Yeah,
just to know, who our.
Tim knows,
corollaries are.
right? Tim,
Yeah.
You went to the
Yeah, I
conference.
was about to say, it's like, we're kind of innovative in what we do, so a lot of programs are looking to us, just based off of what I saw when I went to the conference with Jason. And that's why he's now the vice president.
Yeah, that's right. And I was gonna say, they send out everything.
Yeah.
They're full of.
If you're not on that mailing list, let me know if you want to be on it. They send out a ton of trainings. It's all part inclusive in our membership fee, free trainings, webinars, everything.
In legislation.
You can go in person to a few things.
If there are suggestions for training topics, I'm part of the membership chair, so I can dictate some of the topic focus if we need that, so.
So let us know about that. That's a good one to participate in for sure. And then you get to see what other boards are doing, which is critical for our work.
It is, it's.
Okay. We're gonna keep going. I know if you need to step out for a bathroom break, there's bathrooms right in the hall. We're almost 2 hours in and we're just starting the strategic plan part, okay, so. I'm gonna let Nicole take over in just a minute. I'm just gonna lay some kind of ground rules, I guess, or some grounds, facilitation principles here. But just a reminder, these were our 6 priority areas for the first 3 years. Our priorities were very focused on what components of the community support system do we want to fund? That was where our mind was 3 years ago, right? That's where we wanted to get. We're thinking about programs and money, and then it was like, okay, but what about communications? And then we did a side plan for that. We had a communications plan developed, and I was like, what about systems coordination? And we kind of developed a plan for that. We want to get everything back into one document. So we're not changing priorities necessarily as much as we're changing the format of the plan to have a programmatic component, promotion and awareness of mental health component, and a systems coordination component. So all of those disparate things are in one thing with goals and objectives outlined for each. So just, that's a little bit of a shift in the way we want to see it structured this year. So for each area, those 3 areas I talked about, we're gonna have, well, the broad overall goal remains to develop and maintain a community support system for Winnebago County. And then we're breaking that into our 3 areas of programmatic elements of that, the direct service or whatever type of program, the promotion and awareness and systems coordination. So with that being said, I'm gonna let Nicole present to you a little bit on the programmatic part of this, and we'll get your feedback on objectives and strategies of this area. So here,
Or I can stand. Is that okay?
however you want this.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to begin, I wanted us to take a chance just to review bylaws. So what's specifically focused to this sub-goal and what is actual responsibilities that are outlined in bylaws. So annually review and evaluate community needs and available community mental health and addiction services, including training and education in Winnebago County. Based upon said review, establish a priority list aimed at filling and maintaining the array of services listed in the community support system model and address major priorities for critical gaps in service in Winnebago County. Second, solicit, review, and a comment on all applications for mental health related services aimed at filling identified service gaps in mental health and addiction services available in Winnebago County. So from the environmental scan, so for that community research piece, organizations who completed the environmental scan were asked to estimate the number of clients that they served. So these are broken down, as you can see, it's a little bit small, and we can any information that's presented today, we can, give you the exact slide, the presentation, whatever is helpful. So you can see all the different categories of how many individuals they're serving. So they're organized based in priority area. So we can see which areas have the most, least. Does anybody have questions about this slide in particular?
So that's got all the 11 services.
Mhm.
And, okay,
And so this is just our estimation. So we're gonna get into actual numbers, but just so, from an administrator standpoint, for example, outreach, they're saying for outreach, different organizations collectively serve about 5,000 clients, for example.
yeah,
So we can see areas where there's still, still areas of need that.
It's across all programs.
yeah.
Yes, so no, so environmental scan was anybody that took it in the community, so it could be anybody from any organization.
Okay.
So we're gonna get into funded program stuff specifically. So we'll go ahead and do that here. So this slide represents number of clients served. So from PY 22 to PY 23, these are actual numbers. So if you look at the last section here, this is as of Q3. So Q4 outcomes for our funded programs isn't due until the end of the month. So the most up-to-date data that we have for funded programs is in this very last category represented. So you can see the light blue is substance abuse, pink or magenta is infant early childhood, the little bit darker blue is severe emotional, next dark is serious mental illness, and then navy is total unduplicated clients served.
So our substance use resources and early childhood dropped this year versus last year,
So no, they didn't drop,
or
Yeah.
the number served has dropped.
there's a.
I'm just looking at
From just
quarter
the-
two.
Yeah, just the quarters, yeah, so just be the quarters.
Okay.
So this is also, clients served, yes, quarter by quarter, so yes, I'm sorry, yes, by quarter.
Oh, okay.
But you can see, for example, infant early childhood, you can see all the way from Q1 of 2022, for example, the increase over time. Yeah, and just to see like, just from 2022 all the way to now, just like how significant, the jumps are, yes.
So just according to this chart, we need to really focus on trying to get more help to the infant and early childhood.
Yeah.
Yes, and so, as you remember from the target, the gap analysis that was sent out to organizations for the new applications that people submitted, so the ones you're currently reviewing, that was one of the highlighted targeted areas. So people
Right.
specifically to try to come up with a way, for example, for this population, because we know it's being underserved, in particular, yes.
But also substance abuse. And I noticed that was not one of our priority areas.
So detox and, so low income detox and harm reduction was.
Yes.
In particular to substance use. So there are substance use programs, and we also have to remember, there are multiple things that can go into number of clients served. So an organization, for example, might do outreach with 100 individuals, but maybe only 2 are willing to sign up for services, right? So it's not the, it's who's actually being served. So if that helps.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, so this slide here has money awarded by priority area over project year. So the red is PY 22, the teal blue color is PY 23, and PY 24 as in end of quarter 3. So once again, we don't have all of the end of the year data because the end of the year just happened in terms of money about 2 weeks ago. So you can see by priority area how much money has been awarded, but not how much money has been spent. So to make sure that there's the difference there. Are there any questions anybody has on this slide in particular? And you can kind of see them in order to show mental health treatment, for example, has had the largest amount of money awarded. Next is crisis response services, next is case management, next is family and community support, then client identification, and then housing in particular.
That's children and adults
Yes,
under mental health treatment.
yes,
Okay.
yep. Okay, so if we move here, this, I like this one better because this works better for me to visualize this. So this is money again, money awarded, but it's just a different way to look at it. So when we look at the sum of money to be awarded, it to just be broken down into categories.
Can we go back?
So this one,
The second one that you just did. the
Yep.
Pie chart. So we're up to 8 million, almost $9 million in crisis response. Okay,
Over 3 years.
yes, yeah,
over 3 years.
yeah, so it's, I'm sorry, I should have said that, PY 22 all the way to
Okay,
current
all right,
time,
okay.
yep.
All right, that helps.
Okay, so the next 3 slides are, each slide represents a program year, so this is program year 22. Funds per agency, and so what I think is interesting about these slides, and I wish there was a way that we could do them side by side, but we can just keep clicking if necessary, but to show over time, so in PY 22 to see how many different organizations were funded, so for example, we'll go forward. And to see how many more over the next year. So how much more diversified it was in terms of more organizations that received funding. So if we go back, you can see the difference. Some organizations, received a little bit additional funding, but a significant increase in overall jump. And then if we go forward again, as a current moment, so this does not include any obviously evaluations that you're currently evaluating because they haven't been completed. But as it stands, anybody that received continued funding, this is what PY 24 is currently.
If we could just note, this is the name of the lead agency. Some of these are collaborative
Yes,
applications. So when you see City of Rockford at 19%, that includes the co-responder team, which is 3 different law enforcement jurisdictions with Rose Krantz and the Rockford Fire with UW Health Center.
Yes, this is the fiscal agent, yes.
I was wondering, how did you divide that? Because I see Rosecrans, City of Rockford, and Winnebago County over there, but they're all with the co-responder program.
So
So
Rose,
how did that get divided in the pie chart?
yeah, so this Rosecrans is access to care. Winnebago County has the 3 different programs, so Resource Intervention Center, Juvenile Resource Intervention Center, and the Juvenile Detention Center programming. So not CCRT, and then City of Rockford represents CCRT as the fiscal agent and MIH. So UW Health, for example, is a component of MIH, but City of Rockford is the fiscal agent, so UW wouldn't be listed here. So there are significantly more organizations that receive funding, but this is just based on who the lead agency, who is the person who has a contract with you all. And Brightpoint, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Children's Home and Aid changed their name to Brightpoint, so
I didn't wonder what that
yes,
was.
sorry, yes, I should have said that. So it's a new change, so your website has been updated, and
Right point. What was it?
Children's Home and Aid changed their, yeah, I know, I still call it Chazzy, but that's like so many.
It's like Girl Scouts not selling cookies.
Yeah, Lori Poppins said that they needed to move into like a new era of ways that they're responding to families, so that's what she said. So, okay, so in regards to grants, so PY 22, there were 15 funded programs. Lived experience, community and provider research identified gaps to which Winnebago County Community Mental Health Board approved funding to address. In PY 23, there were 30 funded programs. The first impact report was published demonstrating outcomes of PY 22 funded programs. Completed 30 site visits, which it's about 27, but we'll get to the other ones. In their organizations, implemented an abstract process, so those innovative ideas that we talked about to close remaining gaps. So different gaps, for example, eating disorder treatment was one that was specifically identified that there needs to be some additional services. PY 24, there's currently 30 funded programs with a potential of 15 additional, so 15 current new applications are being evaluated. Once again, lived experience, community, and provider research identified remaining gaps to help determine the application process. Yeah. Does anybody have questions about grants in this regards? Okay. So this is the section. I don't think we can make it any bigger than this. So I'm going to do my best to explain it. So these are all draft objectives and draft strategies. So I want to make sure as we continue to move through, these are drafts, right? So we can have a discussion about it, ask any questions that you'd like. So these are broken down into 4 objectives specifically for programming. So objective 1, targeting and filling gaps. So convening consumers and key stakeholders to identify gaps within the community support system. That's the objective of number 1.1. So strategies to be able to implement this would be conduct community research that encompasses both lived and professional experience and identifying population and service needs lacking in Winnebago County. So before I move on, does anybody have any questions about that specific objective?
Or
No.
feedback?
Okay.
Would this group sitting here today have enough knowledge to begin that process to know where to start? Rather than just going out to the community, would this group have enough knowledge to know where to target?
So targeting and filling gaps would specifically be addressed by the convening of stakeholders. So that's that environmental scan survey that was put out. So that was just conducted in the fall, right? So was it in the fall? Yes, okay. That seems so long ago. So the conducting of community research is something that is ongoing, so I don't know, I guess I'm not really sure how to answer your question specifically, so.
Well, I'm not sure I'm asking appropriately. I guess if I'm hung up on reactive, proactive, I guess the environmental scan is there. With this group, with its knowledge, not that I have it, like the scope of what we've already done, be able to further hone that down to know where to begin.
I think some of that's already been done by the board with the abstract process we had this year, which identified specific program gaps that lean on broad priorities.
Okay.
I think the ongoing process of it is like keeping that temperature gauge on where new gaps are coming up or where programs had already this year, 2 programs that lost state funding, something we're partially funding that like, have to close its doors because of the state funding. So I think that's the part of the ongoing part of it is probably, yes, today we could just say, here's the gaps that we know exist remaining proactively. Let's fill them. What are the ways that we keep that finger on the pulse?
Well, one of the things, I went to a meeting a month or 2 ago about Iris.
Yes,
And Iris is interesting. It was kind of interesting, but while I was sitting at that meeting, what I kept thinking is it's wonderful to have a way for me to give Mohammed an appointment at an organization with Terry. But what if what Mohammed needs, there isn't Terry? What if there is no place to send them? And that's the gap that I was sitting there going, it's great that you're collaborating, but there's still these giant holes where we don't have enough resources for people to get the services they need. So I guess my question is, as part of that targeting and filling gaps, are we thinking about like connecting to Iris or other equivalencies in the
Some of that's gonna be in the systems, so
Yes, yeah,
one of the
and
levels of this is
communications,
then,
yeah.
so like, this is like. Program by program, what are the programs that don't exist, and then that systems coordination is how do we connect
Okay. Correct.
So you keep your questions,
system
and at the very end, if we haven't addressed it, then you re-ask us.
Okay,
But I feel that your question will be answered.
okay,
Yes.
Wendy, I think that's the benefit of having the community support system. And
yes,
identifying the 11 programs that research has shown need to be in place to deal with serious, mostly disturbed kids and adults. So that's, and I was gonna comment on that before we had the one slide. That you asked about, what other boards are doing. And this is the one piece where I think it keeps us from mission drift. Because it brings us back to, like, what is it that we ought to be doing?
the target.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Okay, so that's really what we're talking about and filling in the blanks.
got it.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So, in the strategy, one of the strategies is conduct community research. That taps into people's lived experiences, professional experiences. I'm just wondering, there's a benefit to maybe trying to do, on a limited basis, just as a spot check, some type of the equivalent of secret shoppers, where you would get some people, 4 or 5 people with a made up sort of demographic to send in the system. The only reason I ask that is because if professional experiences, the professionals have their sort of angle. I'm just wondering if whoever we're tapping into for the lived experience is already have enough lived experience that they know how to get over some gaps that somebody coming in wouldn't know how to get over. You know what I'm trying to say?
That is one major player in that is NAMI. Because I will tell you, clients that try to get services all over Winnebago County, when they can't get in or they can't find what they need, they call NAMI. NAMI has a list of people that they advocate to try to find services. They'd be the population that you're looking for because they are really out there. And they're being turned down at different agencies because of criteria or whatever. Criteria can be money, it can be diagnosis, it can be various components, transportation, whatever. So I think that NAMI would have great resource to answer that question about with people with lived experience, because that's who they deal with 100% of the time. And they don't provide the service. They just are the complaint takers in a sense, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When the shoppers would get what they need.
Yeah.
And we had conducted the public participation survey, which included lived experience, but also family lived experience. So not necessarily the individual, but the family reporting on their experiences or hearing of the experiences of people with lived experience.
Yeah.
In addition to providers, in addition to administration. So later on in the presentation, there's really good data that you'll see. So for a person with lived experience, I might say that this is a huge concern. But when we compare with administrators are like, no, this is very simple to do.
Yeah.
So that disconnect to say somebody who's in different positions, right, have entirely different opinions. So we have to utilize that information to make sure that we're making sure that we are, being informed. So, okay, so for funding, so 1.2, Winnebago County Community Mental Health Board members have a duty to be fiscally responsible and accountable to taxpayers through the strategic identification of programs needed to address service or system needs in the community. So members review and evaluate submitted and completed grant applications. Members vote and approve funding decisions to organizations and review and evaluate monthly financial submissions from funded organizations consistent with an expenditure-based funding policy. Does anybody have any thoughts, feedback about funding objectives or strategies? Okay. 1.3 grant management provides support and guidance to programs seeking or receiving funding. So this was a discussion earlier. So create a multi-tiered system of support and accountability for funded programs. So create a system of support. So I'll just give two very different examples. One organization who was funded every single program year, who has been doing mental health treatment, who is known to be in the community, would in theory require way less support or technical assistance than a brand new pilot program who just became a part of this system. So two entirely different approaches to be able to respond. So for example, the first example of somebody who's been in the community, funded for 3 years, doing really well, maybe they get an annual site visit, right? They turn in their quarterly outcomes, their monthly submissions. Maybe somebody who just piloted, maybe they get a site visit every month. Just a check-in, a follow-up, how's it going? How is your hiring going? What questions do you have? What support do you need? Who could we connect you with? So somebody else that's doing similar work on the other side of town that you could connect with. So different levels of support. So not all resources are being targeted to every organization, especially if there were to be 45 coming up here soon, for example. We would want to make sure that everybody's getting the support that they need, but that accountability piece is in there as well. So for programs that do need a little bit of assistance, maybe they were fully staffed and something happened and they've lost 12 employees. That's a different conversation. They might need some additional support. So B is maintain a learning network collaborative, encompassing leadership of funded programs to increase community knowledge and sharing of resources. So that sharing of knowledge and information, so somebody to say, you know, I'm having this issue with my clients with transportation, and somebody else from another organization who's been around a lot longer can say, this is what works for us, and they can kind of mutually share ideas and barriers and struggles that they might be having. Attend annual site visits to observe funded programs and discuss programming. So for grant management, does anybody have any questions about or feedback about this particular section?
I think you have done a tremendous job of connecting our grantees to one another. And if this never goes beyond our 5 years, I hope that that ethic in the community is one that continues, because I think that probably is the best practice a community can have. So that I know I'm gonna call Chelsea when I've got this kind of problem, you know, and that makes me more efficient and our organization too better.
And
That won't happen.
You don't think so?
No, because, I mean, I will tell you that from experience and what we have seen. See, that's what this board fills.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, when we talk about building the array, we're talking about building an integrated community system of care, okay? If we go away, they will go back
It will
to,
evolve. You're right.
they will go back to what gives me perpetuity. And I will do only what the people giving me the money are asking me to do. And that, and that's the reason why, in a sense, this board and this staff, you know, are raising, in effect, a system. Because again, each of these agencies have to believe that their brother and sister agencies are going to be working with them. Okay, and that's the only time you see from that. I mean, again, from what we saw in the homeless task force, people will give if they see each of the agencies being willing to kind of stretch themselves.
Right.
But you take that away, and they're right back within the silo. Kind of, what do I need to do to survive?
I think you guys do.
Thank you. Okay, so 1.4 evaluation. Determine the efficacy individual programs have on overall systems change within Winnebago County. It was like they just like teed it up perfectly for this. So collect program-specific data regarding target populations and measurable outcomes. Measure the efficacy and impact of individual funded programs. Determine the efficacy individual programs have on overall change within the community support system. So we know when somebody submits their outcomes, we can say how well this program is doing. But we also want to know how well does this program work next to this one, incorporated into the system in relation to Winnebago County, right? To show the overall impact that each have on one another and the absence of one of them, how that would change the system. Does anybody have questions or feedback on this piece?
So this one about the outcomes that I mentioned earlier, I'm looking to be spoon fed. I'm
Okay,
sure I
great.
can call any one of you and say, how's this program doing? What were their outcomes? No, I'm not gonna do it. I'm probably not gonna do it. I'm not gonna think to do it. That's why I made the comment earlier, at a routine scheduled board meeting for you to report to us, we have the new outcomes for this one. Particularly, I'm used to boards being on them, the boards are engaged in a conversation of troubleshooting to some degree. So you're seeing something that isn't going particularly well. I know we struggle with open meeting, but you're willing to share with the board, you know, we've gotten the quarterly outcomes from such and such an organization. We're not really hitting their targets. Does anybody have any ideas? This is what our action plan is. Having said, I don't hear that. It's there if we called you, but to me, it would be more meaningful if we routinely were appraised of outcomes, hitting their mark, not hitting their mark. If they're not, what they're doing about it. That's just me. Maybe nobody else feels.
No, I.
Well, and the way that the outcome forms are set up, they have an entire section that's called reflections. So if, for example, they sought to impact 100 individuals and quarter one goes by and we see they've impacted 0. And so in the reflection section, it will say, we have attempted to hire and we have posted the job this many times. We've done interviews this many times, right? So you have actual context. So when I provide you the number to say it's 0, you have the actual context to say, this is what they're doing to be able to do that, right? So, so we already have sections to do that. And I also, I was gonna mention it earlier, but just as a forward thinking, so for evaluation, from the different phone calls that we received, I did some data collection. So to say, what were the things that people commonly asked about? So in real time, one board member in particular contacted me about something that they wanted. So I just made the change right there to update everybody on that specific item. So, so to make sure that we're, you know, ever changing, ever evolving, that when there's information wanted, that it'll be added in for next year.
But I'm looking for you to proactively.
Yes, yes,
Present on a
yes.
regular basis, not that it's triggered by a phone call.
yes. Yes.
So, if I may, maybe there's a way, because I reckon, maybe there's a way to automate what you, I know there's a way, I just don't know personally. To not add more, to work smarter but not harder. You already got the information. Maybe there's a way to keep it updated in some kind of dashboard that we have access to, and that those who don't feel like dealing with technology, that you can just pull it up at the board meeting. Here's the dashboard.
Okay.
Type of thing. I know there's some kind of technology out there that can do that without you having to do extra work. I'm not suggesting you do extra work, but the work that you've done, put it in a format that we all can access. And as part of the ongoing training, we could have some technology training for all of the boards. So they can access it without you having to put up.
Okay, so lastly, measures of success. So measures of success are in regards to the entire programmatic section. So I'm gonna read them to you just because I know they're small. So annual evaluation of Winnebago County mental health and substance use gaps and strengths. 3 board members review and score grant applications to strategically fill identified gaps. Increase the percentage of programs who successfully complete all intended outcomes for the program year. 100% of programs report on intended outcomes. 100% of organizations have been assessed and assigned a tiered level of support and accountability. 100% of organizations participate in a site visit. All renewal program funding based on past evaluation data. And 100% of organizations utilize previous program year performance data to inform future programming. That's okay, yeah.
Very nice.
That's
Okay, so does anybody have any feedback about those statements?
So maybe I heard one that was develop a reporting mechanism for regular outcomes reporting to the board, which would be a data dashboard or something.
Yeah.
I think we should
We can do that.
capture
we have
that
that.
as a, you know, some point that needs to be checked off.
I'm gonna hand it over to Justin.
So your promotion and awareness is the next new priority area in the strategic plan. So I'm gonna kind of revisit the communications plan. So that's that foundation report that was presented back in October of 21. And so this is kind of building upon our existing infrastructure of how we operate. So that communications report, we had our target audience and our tactic and platforms. And so we have that matrix, and it is, well, if there's one X, it's lower reach, and then more X's means that's gonna be more impactful for the potential. I'm trying to figure that one. So here's a matrix. So different platforms are going to be beneficial for different target populations that we're trying to address. I'm going to kind of go through all of the areas that we've been addressing. We've hit all of them and show some of the things that we've been being able to accomplish and how we've been growing upon some of these areas. So we have our website, which has all of it's our landing site for all of our information. We have our funding resources, our funded programs are on there, and all of our reports are published on our website. We have presentations, so those reports are the strategic plan, the annual report, which are our mandated ones for the Community Mental Health Act. But we've also, for transparency, we've added those outcome reports. And we've also implemented that impact report. So with presentations, we've actually done over 20 since we've started. And we've actually had 2 on a national scale. We presented at Remy, and then last week we were at Mental Health America. With the emails.
Can I speak to just quickly, Chelsea, like, so the other 18, who are those?
Oh, so
Not name everyone, but.
The faith community, the Chamber of Commerce, the update.
Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs.
Yes.
You presented with Lifescape.
Lifescape, yes, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Rockville
Rockville,
College.
yes.
Center.
We've done it. Oh, I have a list. I can give you that list.
Community stakeholders. and different
yeah.
sectors.
But I mean, one program year, we did 16. That was when we were really, that's when we had a lot of our programs operating. We've kind of toned it down, but then we've actually been able to be doing presentation outside of our community as well. So getting our information out there. So with email, we have MailChimp, and I'll kind of explain some of these in depth a little bit more later. We have community newsletters that we're a part of. NAMI is one of them. We've been a part of the county board newsletters at one point. With news media, it's about our programs and our activities and what they are being communicated through news. And I'll kind of go into that with the communications working group and that charter that we presented. But we've been on TV, news, magazine, and Northwest Quarterly is an example of one of the magazines. The press conference we did when we had our first grant announcements. And then we've done PSAs. So every May Mental Health Month, we're talking about what our programs have been doing. Also doing some other information about other relative topics related to mental health in general, is informative. So Facebook is our main platform that we utilize. And with the integration with Meta, Instagram is our second platform. We are able to post stories. And so utilizing those together to be on more than one platform. And those are the best for our type of content. And then we have our YouTube. Hi, YouTube. We broadcast our board meetings on, and we have other videos that we post on there, especially when it comes to grant cycles coming up, the grant seekers, those Q&A sessions, and I'll go into that a little bit more. And then we have our LNCs, which Nicole talked about, but we have 4 every year for each program cycle, and we have the programs attending those. With that, that actually kind of spawned the creation of the comms working group. And then those additional methods that we do are the survey that we just talked about, the PPS and the environmental scans. We have the program handouts that we give out. We boost posts when appropriate, and we've been building up brand recognition with branding and logos.
Can I interrupt for a second, Chelsea?
Absolutely.
Hey, I saw our logo on a bus. And no kidding, I'm sitting there at a stoplight, there was this bus sector, I went, what, wait a minute, and I want to take a picture of it, I thought, oh, wow, there we are. You know, because you don't normally see that, and it was on a bus. And so anyways, yeah, it was cool to see that.
Yeah.
So I was trying to grab my phone, take a picture of it. The bus took on it, well,
There will be more of that. And
yeah, it's neat to see.
but no, I mean, they're going to be more of that in the coming future, so. So I could control the stuff for
We
YouTube.
paid for that, I assume, on the bus?
That was through one of the grant applications they put in for marketing, so.
Yeah, it said this
Yes.
program is funded by the one.
Yes, and yes,
program.
and we will have standards for that coming up. So when kind of going back to our platforms and tactics. That website, we've grown. So the first year we're kind of transitioning, but as you can see, our numbers are going up. So we have the resources page, but then there's our clicks. So the thing is, that's hosting all of those type of content of like, here's the notebook, here's our strategic plan, here's the documents that people need to reference. So we're not even in, like, completed our last fiscal year. We're pretty much already at those mark points. And as you can see, particularly around grant cycles, we're actually the second most visited site on all of Region 1. And sometimes all three of our pages are in the top 10. And as you can see here, we're the second most interactive button page. So we can track button analytics. As you see on our page, we have those green buttons for things. I can track how much those are clicked. So right here, right when we just did our last grant launch, you can see a big spike. This is MailChimp. It's more of a higher level target population. And so the people who are engaged in board meetings and grant applications. So we've grown in our audiences at 260, but the fact is we have that open rate. Or I'll just point, is at 37%. The industry standard is 28. So people are engaging with it, with the content we're sending out. And that click rate is 7.4, the industry standard is just under 4. And when we send out emails, this orange is the actual amount of emails we send out. Blue is people opening them. Here you can see people are reopening our emails. There's an email here, it's pretty much about the same. People are reopening it, even though there wasn't an email sent out. They're revisiting. Particularly here, this is one email. We got a spike here and it's tapering. People are still engaging with that resource being vital for them. YouTube, so my last update, we were at 14 subscribers, we're at 45 right now. People who are actually watching are not always subscribing, so the number of people visiting is actually more than that. So our first, so these are top videos, and I'll explain here. So this is the first peak, our top watch video, is actually the first time we had any grant information. So it's a historical video that was a completely incredible moment for us. That grant announcement is actually our third most watched video, but people are still watching it. We have our, when we announced the 30 programs, that's our second most watched video. So that's actually this peak right here. And then we have the the about video that's posted on our homepage for the YouTube. That is actually our fourth most watched video, that's purple, so that's when we launched it. And we get spikes around when people are visiting the YouTube a lot more. So that has a longevity of how people are watching that. The March 1st board meeting, that is the abstract decision, so that's this big red one. So we actually have 9 videos that have over 100 views. And our most recent grant announcement with the renewals is actually in that top 9. So social media, we have Facebook and Instagram. We've doubled. This was last time I gave an update, this was at 75. Facebook was more established, it's over 168 growth since then. But since that was the platform at the time, was way more established, and we keep growing as time goes on. So our top posts on our Facebook, the top 3 are actually those boosted posts. So this was our public participation survey. The top 2, we're getting 12,000, 10,000, we're paying for those boosts, but those surveys are getting out there to the community. And then when we first time we did our convening organizations to collaborate, we strategically boosted that to make sure that people knew, hey, here's an opportunity to collaborate. So we boosted that. there's more opportunities for us to do that, but the rest of these are all organic. These are NOFOs, the two most recent ones, when we had the recent grant open, when it was closed, and then a post about kids going back to school, a mental health topic. So it's not just always the grant information, but we have, you know, pretty decent engagement, like that was shared 8 times. So a lot of our grant information is our most important stuff, but that's the most important thing that we're trying to get out to the community. So with the results of the public participation survey, the question was asked, which of the following types of services would you like to learn more about? The top 2 answers are the ones I'm gonna kind of focus on, but it's finding information about services and having access to or knowing about crisis response services. So going back to the community support system framework, we have the outer purple circle, promotion and awareness. So reading the vision again, we see a community where residents are knowledgeable about mental health and have access to high quality and substance use services when and where they need them. So in coming to that, we have a lot of organizations that do talk about mental health and are promoting and talking about stigma and everything, but we don't want to overly duplicate that. And then we have our funded programs. So that sweet spot in the middle is what came to the rise of the communications working group. So we have representatives from organizations. We asked them at the LNC, hey, we are starting this working group. Would you like to be a part of it? We actually have representatives from small first-time organizations where they do everything. I am the grant manager, I'm the CEO, I do grant corporate compliance, I do everything. We also have representation from larger organizations that have a dedicated grant, dedicated grant department and then communications people. So we have perspectives from both types of programs when it's going to come to their infrastructure for communication. So that was important. So strategizing how we can inform the community about mental health, and then specifically demonstrating the impact of our programs. So what does that look like? And so that was back in the charter that you guys approved back in January of this year. So we have a contract requirements. So programs that come and give presentations at board meetings. If we're going to be at 30 or 45, that's not practical for us to be having 2 presentations each time. So what we're going to do instead is that video, and that we're going to ask the programs to record that video, and then we can host it on our YouTube channel. And then in talking with the working group, it was also important that we wanted to make sure that the board, the organization that hosts a funded program, their board and their stakeholders are informed that they host a funded program, and they also get that video or that presentation that's produced. So it's making sure that if someone enters a program that might not always do mental health or does other things, that the staff or more the stakeholders are aware that they host a funded program. And then we've also then obviously started that impact report. So taking the qualitative and quantitative data and putting that out to the community and having those in stories. So then this is where that branding, those billboards, is coming to a toolkit development. So we're currently working on that now, and we got like ideas of what we wanted in those things from the comms working group. What will be happening? They're going to develop the cool toolkit. We're going to get some feedback on that. We'll give it to the board, we'll give it to the working group, get some feedback. So it's important having those large and small organizational representation in there, trying to make it as easy and effectively and accurately communicating we are funded from a standard policy. So it's going to have approved wording, approved guidance, approved messaging of what you can say. And we're going to ask the programs quarterly have a social media post about their program. Who better to speak on what their program is accomplishing is the programs themselves. And they will tag the mental health board, and then any other communication that they have whether that be flyers, brochures, when they're talking to the media, they're going to have information that will accompany when they talk about the program that is funded. So one thing that, and then we also came up with the idea of the annual resource fair. And so we were able to actually accomplish that already. So we,
Chelsea,
yes,
I said, how would that, cause I know, the health department had an issue with that. How will, like, are there certain programs that would be able to opt out or certain criteria for people that opt out of that?
we will work with each of the programs because especially, this is why we talked with the working group of being like, do we feel like these things are overly, extra work? And so that's kind of why we developed the toolkit to help make that possible. But, as, with grant management, we work with each program to help try to implement their ability or their, trying to make sure that they can try to meet these. So that means adapting something or anything else. Do you have any other addition with that?
No, it's kind of any part of our contracts, there's always some degree of negotiation in terms of like specific agencies, just like we operate a little differently, we can't do this thing, and we've always, to Chelsea's point, trying to make it work for everyone and still maintain the integrity of what the board's trying to do.
What's the issue with that? Well, I think they were the only pushback, right, that we've had.
Yeah,
And it was just one specific statement. It wasn't like they weren't like in a disagreement. It was just like a slight modification, but
Okay,
like we were saying, some organizations are very small and some are very large. So a very large operation is gonna, have a different perspective. So all of those modifications are up to board president. So they're reviewed and decided upon
And
board president.
I'm going to make an effort to meet with every single organization's communications lead and help try to facilitate working with the funded program contact and being, okay, we're going to require these quarterly posts. How can we try to help facilitate this dynamic of making sure those are going to be fulfilled? So trying to help, get that process going.
but understanding part of the grant process itself and embedded in that, there, with modification, there hasn't been anybody who said, no way, we're not gonna do this, or,
the health department
well,
pushed back on a lot of it.
apparently with some modification. Or what was if you're able to share the rationale behind that?
They felt that the nature of their program, that it would be stigmatizing to their clientele to promote the program publicly.
remind me, what are we funding for them?
It's a mental health worker that essentially takes referrals from their other programs. So they have a number of
Okay,
types of programs, and any one of those programs can make a referral to the mental health clinician. And then that mental health clinician can connect them to mental health services in the community. But no one else has made it. Most others, all the other organizations have embraced that. And because we engage so many of the funded organizations ahead of time, most felt that it really promoted their work in a positive manner and showed the cohesion of this community support system, that they are part of that. And so, I think there's been a lot of embracing of that.
And with the working group as well, we all, the kind of group this, came to the sense like, yeah, these should be things that will help facilitate, awareness of these programs. And it's also in our best interest. This will be the first year of doing this. I will be working with these programs to try to make sure that, what can we do? But that's why we're going to have a toolkit. So make it as easy as possible for these programs. And through the working group, the members actually asked, can we have an orientation? So that was actually added in RFQ when we solicited for the communication specialist to have an orientation. So we will have one. It will be in person. There will be I call it a rain date. And then there will also be a professionally produced version of that we can historically have. So that in case, some of these organizations are complicated, where it's just not one person or one person leaves and comes back. And so then how, making sure we have a guide and how to implement it. And that will be examples of practical application of it. And then organizations can ask the communication specialist, because they're the experts about trying to implement communications, how to go about some of these, problems that might arise. So, yes. So that was added component by why we engaged a working group when determining what these items would be. Any more on this? Okay. Great. We get to talk about some celebratory things. So.
Well, could you move back? I'm sorry.
Yes. Move back one, beyond.
No, you were on the right one.
Oh,
I was probably in
This
the
one?
brain, I was probably. Our strategies presentation of the mental health board summarizing outcomes. So maybe you said it,
mhm.
I apologize. When organizations have come to us in the past,
Mhm.
do they come because we've asked them or they've asked us to say, can we come?
So actually it started that the programs wanted to present themselves, and I think it was kind of a hybrid of like, hey, can you present? And then people were coming and presenting on their programs for updates, I think, for grant updates. So it kind of spawned into this kind of like, oh, we added that presentation to our board meeting outline of having a presentation. And with the reality of having more programs, like that's practically not going to be available. And then, we had this plan them throughout the whole year. And, with some of our board meetings, they get long. So that's why we decided having a recorded version of that. So then also beyond just the board meeting, can we use it and then taking it and putting it back into their organization. So,
Yes, you did say that. I
mhm,
apologize.
no worries, but I want to make sure I can clarify. So then,
I don't want to stop conversation, but if anyone's in 3-hour parking, just be mindful. that-
We're all in true.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
So,
maybe take a.
Yeah, and I have your order, so I better. What did they do? Give you a big fat ticket?
it's like $25 or $30.
That's a little.
Can we have enough money in our budget?
Yeah.
I don't remember that as the line.
So, no, if anybody is in this parking lot, you can move over here. If you're in this parking lot, move over here. Do not move a spot within the same parking lot.
Oh,
Move
no
to an
kidding.
entirely different.
I've got
Pardon?
20 minutes.
Yeah, we can, well.
Right
now.
We still have to do the strategies for this, and then I've got the systems coordination. I mean, we can be concise, but it's up to you how much. If you want us to zoom through it, or if you want us to.
Well.
You know what? I've got everyone else. Since I was so sorry.
yeah, so, okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, just
3:38, come back in 10 minutes.
don't talk about any.
I will.
Yeah.
Right. But if it's just.
Better talk. So where did you tell me to park? From what?
If you're by Octane, go to
Yeah.
Veterans Hall. If you're at Veterans Hall, go
Okay.
in for this way.
Thank you.
Yep.
I got the last.
I was gonna say, there was no parking.
Rotary today,
I figured.
yeah. So it made it full. Yeah.
So how was, Washington City?
It was great. Conference is really good.
I was gonna ask that.
Except the Canadian fires. There's like forest fires in Canada.
Oh, okay, okay.
And so all the smoke had come down the East Coast.
Oh,
So it was like a code red air quality.
Yeah.
You couldn't.
We've been exposed to that, so we've been like having a sore throat and a cough from being out there, so,
they're wearing a mask, Kelly?
People were.
Yeah.
Outside. even.
yeah. Last day, after presenting, walking the mall a bit, it looked clear, but definitely there was a little more of an impact.
Yeah, it's congested. All
Yeah.
weekend, still a little.
How was the presentation that you all?
Oh, it's good. Great feedback, great attendance, and some good connections with other communities doing similar stuff and wanted to have conversations in the future just to share best practices and share what they're doing. So it was good from that standpoint as well.
There was 150 online and probably about 30 to 50 in person. So, but then the thing is, it's available online 30 more days. So while it wasn't watched in real time, it's available. So there's gonna be more.
Is that the link that you sent us?
Yes.
So we can still click on that link?
If you're, I
Thought I couldn't click on it since I didn't watch it. live.
register, I think it's now like ability to register for the event has closed. But I'm requesting them that they provide the video. So if not, if you didn't register prior, I will somehow get the video, so. It's getting hot in here.
Yeah, we'll try to do that.
Yeah, up to AC.
Polish your breaks and kind of what or it's long.
No, it was just. Back when Haney was there, they got. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chelsea, but I need to get move around.
No, it's okay. It's a long meeting.
Yeah. Well, it's informative too, though. There's a
And
lot here.
Good brownie straight.
Oh, you're welcome. Kelsey, yeah, my daughter Kelsey. the Youngest.
I have a list of presentations.
Well,
Yeah.
Want to
Yeah.
say basically like
I just didn't throw,
what kind of group should we?
yeah, yeah,
You can.
yeah, I can.
I got me another watch.
Oh, yeah?
This, Android. So it's a tourbillon movie and they put it in the center of the watch.
That's cool. I was gonna wear my black and
Oh, yeah.
That's nice.
So we have some friends who we would always
Yeah, so the SAS, so hard to do,
You know,
that, and send it out wide.
travel with. Consolidate.
Oh,
And
It's really neat.
when I was saying.
My cousin is watching that, so he'll send me.
Well, what got me
He'll
started
send
was,
us. He
I was on
has over
Facebook
to.
Marketplace. And there was.
He's been like that ever since we were little kids.
really?
Yeah, from back till the time that all the way up.
White leather
And so
interior.
if you see
and a white
somebody
top.
walking.
And
up the
the
street,
behind the car is
talking about their watch,
red
the company that made it.
Mustang with a white interior. And I.
So he can put
It
a.
was like in Crystal Lake and.
Keep
I'm
track
like,
of all his
oh, I'm
watches.
interested. I mean,
Yeah,
this
so,
looks really
yeah, so it
interesting.
lists the watch like
I got
this,
a
on
couple
there,
from the council.
sometimes it's worn.
These are gonna buy it. And,
Now,
I had to do a little mental preparation.
I used to,
And
so
then
I
I-
stopped opening it,
This
so
one,
they don't
my
send
one of my
it.
neighbors.
I'm all agree.
Well, the reason I changed, you know, basically.
Why not?
Why not?
I slow down. I get longer bad, you know, talk about, white person. So I can't talk about her no more.
Just that.
She got too much evidence.
Right.
It's, I have to remember the next time I'm going to try to street flying. I can go.
And she got it.
Oh,
yeah, surprise. Well, our friend was supposed to be years ago.
That's why we were here, because like,
It was like. And our favorite, still laughing about it, our favorite moment. Was my husband is like, this is the.
Yeah.
Name. And finally standing. Driving boat, I feel like, actually, I heard it into watch.
That's a good guy.
Our Escanaba, so you're really, no, you're an hour from.
Running my son.
There.
Yeah.
And we heard off the road, and it's getting to be.
Yeah.
dusk.
And.
It's not bad.
Nice.
Doesn't.
She leans forward, she said, I'm not getting out of there. It's from a Stephen King novel.
Slowly.
So. That was the best.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was so beautiful.
There's a place up there.
Yeah, it's,
Yesterday I put.
yeah.
And where
It
you-
feels-
That was my check. She was like.
Yeah.
When I was, I had to go.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, oh, you can see it way better.
So much.
Okay,
Now.
so for the record, 3:48, we are back. Okay. Yes, so that is the resource fair. So we have every single renewal program except for one, which is, just couldn't get it in, but we had 25 of the 30 funded programs represented at the fair. So every person, got a handout, and when talking with the working group, people talked about how they were able to get new clientele and new people set up with their services as a result of this fair. So, as you can see, we had the exterior with all of the programs and organizations represented, and then in the middle, so that people can mingle. So, there were over 200 people in attendance, and as I said, everyone got a handout, and we handed out over 100 impact reports, at this event. So, you see just handing out and people engaging with organizations. So kind of. So taking everything into consideration that we've been doing from all the conversations and multiple board meetings. And discussions we've had and how we've grown. Taking, that foundation, that communications plan, and then the intent and desires of the group. This is what we envision for the next stage. So this is our draft, I shouldn't say draft, but it isn't. We have access, which is engaging the target populations, so individuals and families, know how and where to access mental health services, including the funded programs. So the first one we have A is funded programs create quarterly social media posts to promote their program, contract requirements. Funded programs participate in an annual resource fair, function the working group. And then funded programs promote their programs through community referral systems, including resource guides, websites, technology, and other platforms. So that community support system framework. So promoting mental health in general, and getting integrated with different resources. So that is actually 3-1, that is for access and objective. Any questions on that?
So that still presumes with citing and referencing our funding to them, that presumes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So then 3-2 is awareness, which increasing overall community members' awareness of the community support system framework and the funding strategies of this mental health board. So A is develop a toolkit for funded programs to promote cohesive messaging about the CSS, funding strategies, and funded programs. B is funded programs utilize the toolkit to provide a cohesive messaging in order to bring awareness of the CSS strategies and programs. C is WCCMHB annual handouts, program handouts, website highlighting the CSS, our strategies and programs. That's the stuff that R1 facilitates. And then WCCMHB promotes the CSS funding strategies, funded programs through multimedia strategies, including social media, news media, and other communication methods. So, our engagement with social media, other communications, our tactics and platforms. And then E is mental health board participating in community events to increase awareness of the CSS, funded strategies, and funded programs. So talking with the working group, being like, what, events are you guys at? What can we be at? What is appropriate? Maybe like, hey, someone in the network deals with the same target population. This is an event specifically for that. Maybe, encouraging them to be a part of that. So kind of building that network of being aware of more community events, and then having opportunities, maybe, we may not be there, but our funded programs are there. Then also, we could have a booth at these events. So it is, multi-level in that approach. So any questions on awareness?
Or feedback on any of those strategies?
Awesome, great.
Okay. And then 3-3 is promotion. So community members know the impacts of the funded program. So we have that so we publish the impact report annually featuring qualitative and quantitative outcomes. We have those annual reports showing the funding utilization. So that's community, what's the?
Mental health acts,
Thank you.
statutory requirement.
Yes, yeah. The funded programs record that annual video highlighting the program impacts, so that's that contract requirement that we spoke a little bit more about. And then the programs highlight the annual impact reports and presentations to their stakeholders. So some of the contract requirements are kind of sprinkled throughout. Some of it's kind of the function of administrative staff and some other increasing that type of activity. So it's kind of a myriad of everything.
Any questions or feedback on the promotion strategy?
Just a thought, I think we talked about this once before, is the power of storytelling and more individual personalized stories. I think, well, some of you know my wife's been very involved in CASA for many, many years, but what they used to do, and they haven't done in a long time, is they would have generally at their annual event, they have 3 people who had grown up and been part of the advocate system, whose lives had turned very positive. You could put all the promotional stuff out there and you wouldn't have enough Kleenex to dry the eyes of the people who are witnessing these stories.
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of folks in busy lives, if you get really detailed, it just kind of goes, it's like white noise. But if you can funded agencies could be convinced to find someone who could tell a story because of this. You kind of referred to it earlier when you went to the visit, you know, there's maybe only this many people, but the impact of that. I think it's important for us to figure out a way to relay impact in a very personal way.
That's great
Yeah.
feedback. And, I had mentioned this to Dr. Copeland at one point. Even the professional evaluators are starting to
Yeah.
connect with the importance of storytelling. The actual American Evaluation Association National Conference this year's theme is storytelling.
Oh, really?
And this is your top evaluators, probably some of your best data minds in the country. And they're like, incorporating now, like storytelling is part of how we evaluate. So from promotion awareness to evaluation, I think that's great feedback. And I think
Well, and looking to that counts. And, she and I paired during the promotion for the sales tax. And her story is a powerful story. And her ability to communicate is powerful. So maybe part of the toolkit could be helping agencies develop those
great
people,
feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
those individuals.
Great feedback.
Because it's a matter of, you can do it.
Yeah.
They do that a lot.
have skills.
I know Rosecrans does that through their own promotion.
And
So,
And that was for the purpose of meeting with all the communications people, to not just be like, check the box, like, hey, like. The people who are facilitating and doing your programs, they know those stories. They know that, so how do we get that information from the program to the communications person to then push that out? So that's why we're having the programs do their own social media, as opposed to, it's watered down in some of our process, and it's, we have outcomes reports, but we're losing those, and that's why we started doing that impact report. So we're gonna keep doing that, but then we're also going to encourage the programs themselves to tell those stories. And we could have a focus of, lived experience or lived stories at a community event, people who want to do that. So we could facilitate that as a community event with that annual, yes.
I think that, I agree with everything that everybody has just said, and I think it's to our benefit to utilize the hard work that you've already put into reports in multiple ways. So under the promotion piece, we publish an impact report and publish this and publish that.
Yeah.
If there's a way that those pieces of information that we put in a big report could be bite-sized,
Yes.
promoted and used that way. And there's a way that we can collect what you just said, that is, you're getting the funded programs to storytell on their own. If in our annual report, we could have like QR codes that would go to their, whatever they've already published, it's no extra work for us. It's just put a QR code, because that's what's gonna carry the day. And what I mean by that is, it's not just that we're promoting, but we're in one sense, preemptively addressing some political concerns through data and storytelling, but you're not adding any extra work.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of putting it in pieces that people can digest. Because part of the problem with big reports is, I get the report.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Yeah.
It's too much.
It's too much. But if I
Yeah.
scan this,
Paragraph.
Yeah.
if I scan this
Yeah.
QR code
Yeah.
and Jeanette Town come up and says, well, because this program was funded now, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a whole different.
I like the change.
Well, they're.
I mean, having those presentations, we can QR code back to them. We've done in the past in the last year's mental health month content was from the outcomes report. And then there was a lot going on, the impact, so the May mental health month content was, encouraging people to read those impact report stories. So yes, but doing more of that and then having integration with connecting them all back. Yes.
Let us be the clearinghouse.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to add more work to you all. I'm just saying, drive it toward us
Yes.
Mhm.
in such a way that your report is just your report is a skeleton, but they're filling in the flesh.
Right.
They've done all the work. And even something as simple as at the annual meeting, at the annual
Resource fair.
resource fair, having a booth where people can give, for lack of a better word, I would call testimony,
Yeah.
but whatever. You can get, if you got 200 people there, 250 people there, you can get easily 15, 30 people, and that's your whole year worth of stuff. You just dribble that out. This one, this month, this one, this month, whatever. Work is already done at the fair. Now it's just a matter of automating it and just spitting it out.
Tim?
So with the, this is something new, I just thought of, would the mental health board or R1 be willing to consider having like a mental health summit in Rockford during one of the mental health awareness month? That way you could bring in providers, as well as, people that are seeking services, bring them all together. Just like a summit on the scale of what we had, what NAMI had, or maybe even larger that way. I don't know if clinicians or anything get, CEUs or anything can provide seminars, different breakdown seminars to provide CEUs for those clinicians, or would that be something that we could take on?
That was actually, getting CEUs was a conversation at the working group. So that could be an option for the presentation that is at the event. So yes, that is already a conversation and, on my list of ideas.
Well,
So,
so,
but-
the nursing expo
Mhm.
next year would like the mental health board to be sort of your primary presenter. And Jason and I had about 1 minute conversation about this, but maybe that's something to like wrap into this. These other organizations that have an interest in what's happening. So anyway, I think there are lots of options here, lots of possibilities to build.
Yeah,
a summit.
great feedback, great ideas, and we could definitely expand on some of this with some of
And
that.
use us, because we can help.
So you're gonna manage it. Okay,
Plan on it.
and then my last slide for me. Okay, come on.
Oh, measures, yeah, that's right.
Yes, it's not going. Maybe this thing is dead. It's dead. Is it okay? One more time.
I'll try.
Thank you.
Good.
Or not. Okay, I can read them to you. Programs, so the measures of success would be programs meeting the contract requirements. Tracking website visits, clicks, etc. Your kind of standard, your monitoring social media engagement, those normal social media, like kind of methods of tracking. So then increasing participation at resource fair, so trying to get, like, we had 25 out of 30, trying to get all 30 or whatever number we're at. And then increasing attendance at the event. And then, so we have actually more time to plan this, so we have more promotion of that event. Tracking number of handouts passed out, just any event. The number of impact reports are handed out, and then actually increasing the number of events that we are present at. So more of external meetings or
Maybe
events.
add Tim's concept of
Mhm.
making it more of a summit. So that there's a draw for practitioners, depending on who presenters are. And a draw for lived experience families. Just, make that sort of a goal.
I mean, and then it's also, even though we foot the expense for it, if we make it like something that people could come all from across the state or the country, that as long as they could get those CEUs, I mean, it's a conference that's economic generating for the whole community, and we get our money off the sales tax. When they stay at the hotel or when they go shopping.
Sounds like I'm on the convention board.
Are these, outputs. But in terms of the success of promotion and awareness, it seemed to me, back to the line item that we have in there now. Things contractual services for data and evaluation.
Yeah.
Seems to me that what would be most beneficial would be to try to get some type of statistically significant community survey on awareness, so we can track it year over year.
Oh, I like
Because we can, if we could track number of people who come to events and handouts and this, that, and other,
Yeah.
but that might not be moving the needle
Right.
as it relates to awareness type of thing,
I think
unless
that-
we have some kind of metric that we can.
I think it's a great idea. I would say on the survey level, people are having a very hard time right now getting statistically significant sample sizes in surveys because everyone has survey burnout.
Yes.
But looking at, even if it's a polling method of calling and asking, are you aware of mental health or something? We could incorporate some metric into the evaluation.
Because what we want is, even if we don't have the statistically significant survey sample or the polling data that would satisfy, some kind of political campaign, we can figure out something from our perspective, even if it's just taking information randomly from certain key providers at strategic times and say, have you heard? You know what I mean? Because the goal is saturation, at least as it relates to promotion of awareness. Is that even if I haven't accessed services, do I know somebody who knows something about something that Rosecrans is doing? And if there's no way that we can, there's gotta be a way that we can be able to gauge the awareness other than our outputs, because our outputs does not necessarily get the awareness.
That's great feedback. We'll figure something out as a saturation metric. I think
Yeah.
that's important. You're right. Some of it is counting numbers that show up at events. We need to see what the outcome of it
That is a higher level, like more difficult, and a lot of the measures of success were kind of based on like things that we could track. But in doing these contract requirements, that is what the working group were like, yeah, if we do these things, then there should be increased awareness. So there will be increased awareness of of that stuff and encouraging those numbers. There's just no, we could look into it if there's.
We have to create it. There's nothing made right now.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is.
Yeah,
That if we figure out, let's be honest, we're in one sense the innovators in this
Right.
regard as it relates to what I've heard you all say from the state and the regional thing. And I think that we could come up with something that could be modeled in other places. That won't take a whole lot of extra work, but it will make a whole lot of sense.
Well, the point Tim has made many times before, we are already in the middle of a political campaign.
Right.
So broad general community awareness, when it comes time to re-up a referendum, just.
well, and that is our
Again,
value of the board is a community that is aware of mental health and has access to high quality mental health and substance use services when and where they need them. So in this community, so that goes back to our vision as this board.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is on a small number, but one of the things that I was talking about, access, even doing mail outs to physicians within the community. Because at least my, one system that I'm aware of has practically no social workers anymore. And so, so the doctors, just, as I say, from a personal standpoint, I hand them our printout on just the programs. And they were really well accepted, because they're saying, we don't have any information that says that, we don't know where the 30 programs are within the community. So it's another data, it's another base of people who have the potential to give us, support, and also for their patients.
Actually, when Lockwood had their press conference for their breaking ground of the equine center, Dick was there with all our furniture. He went to every single person in the BPF and handed them. It's like, what is he doing over there?
On board with it.
Good votes.
Vote for me again. Please vote for me. Please vote for me.
All right, thank you for your feedback on promotional awareness. That was really helpful. We're gonna move on to systems coordination. So just quickly, I'll kind of give you an overview. We did a little bit of an analysis of the organizations that filled out the first environmental scan survey 3 years ago, and then the ones that did this, and in bold, you'll see those that are funded by the mental health board as well. It's kind of like a system capacity analysis to say, have we seen, first of all, change in the percentage of agencies that actually provide a service that are repeat agencies? And so we did see some increase, particularly in the area of assistance to families. It's the highest change area. I'm going to gloss over this and drill in a little bit on the actual 6 priority areas. So when we look at the 6 priority areas that we focused our funding into, we see that services offered in those areas has increased in the number of agencies providing case management, family and community support, and client identification services in particular. Not huge differences. Of course, some of our programs are expanding services with an agency that already provided it. So I'm not necessarily saying the goal is that more agencies provide it, but this is one of the just types of analysis we did. Also, so this might be more interesting to me, which is those organizations that filled out the scan both times. What did it look like in terms of who they serve, from categories of mental illness only, substance use and addiction only, both, or neither? And if we look at this one, you'll see, it doesn't really show up when I go on the screen, but if you're looking at mental health treatment, you have environmental scan 1 on the left and environmental scan 2 on the right. You'll see in almost every category, what we actually saw was an increase in the number of agencies that serve both mental illness and substance use. So we're seeing from our funding, we believe there's an increased ability to serve dual diagnosis rather than just those that have mental illness. And in talking with some of our agencies, just anecdotally, that's a function of having flexible funding. Some of the funding that they currently receive don't allow them to have that flexibility.
Right.
Then we look at location of services. And we're looking at across the 6 priority areas, services offered in office only, services that are mobile only, versus services being provided in a hybrid format where it's available through mobile or in office. And so that's the green color. Focus on that green color because that's where you see a lot of expansion. So we're seeing expansion from agencies that were maybe providing services primarily in office to now offering that service as an optional mobile versus in office. I believe there is no other explanation for this than the local funding.
Right.
The local funding, I believe, has provided the ability for agencies to get out of their office and get into the community and reach people where they're at. When we look at services for non-English speakers, this is not something that is acceptable. I will say there's a caveat here in that this was a question that in the first environmental scan survey was asked for each service area. And in the second one, we felt we could ask it once right at the beginning, do you offer services? So it's not apples to apples. And so we did see that less agents, it looks like when you look at it, that less agencies are providing services to non-English speakers. I think really because it was broken down by service area the first time and aggregate the second time, I don't think we can say that's exactly what's happening, but I think that this is important enough that we need to do more discovery on it, because that needs to be 100% is the point. And whether it is 16% or 33% that don't provide services to non-English speakers, it has to be, that gap has to be closed. It needs to be 100% that are providing services to non-English speakers. So that's one of the areas I think we need to focus on as our part of our systems
Jason,
coordination.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could that, is any way, is that a function of the size of the organization and the resources they have available to them?
Absolutely, because those that have large budgets generally have contracted services with like a phone or
An
a tele
interpreter.
thing where
Exactly.
you can get access to 50 languages,
Right.
100 languages like that.
Right.
So I think we might, again, without getting too tactical, we might look at what type of support smaller agencies need to all have that same level of service.
Yeah.
And are there opportunities for joint procurement where
Yeah.
we can be the purchaser of something that
Yeah,
the entire system benefits from.
Great.
And then also you need to look at qualitative as well as quantitative. I found in court translation, I can think of a trial I did where the defendant spoke English, but his first language was Spanish.
yeah,
And during the trial, he sat there saying, "That's not what I said," to the translator,
Mhm.
because they spoke different versions of Spanish depending on where you're from.
Yeah.
That's a problem, serious problem.
Yes.
When we look at the public participation survey, so again, we broke this down so that when somebody responded to it was distributed widely through the community, but we wanted to know what perspective are you actually representing when you fill this out? So we asked, are you filling this out as an administrator of an agency, as a direct service staff, an individual with lived experience, as a family member, a caregiver of an individual with lived experience, or maybe just as a general community member? We had 258 completions, and then we had 100 partial responses where maybe somebody got like 90% of the way through and stopped. For the purposes of today, I've included all the partial responses as we look at this. That way nobody was, if you filled out 90% of it, we're still looking at the answers that you completed. And just as a note, and I won't go into the details of this, but we tried to categorize the community support system components in common, easy language, not clinical language, you see all the categories, but there were definitions that help describe it in what we felt was a very common way to understand it, rather than what maybe the primer has, which is a little more clinical. When we look at the question of in the past 12 months, which of the following services did you or someone in your household actually use? And we look at that, someone with mental illness is in pink, and a family member of someone would be in purple. And you're seeing that broken down into these various areas of kind of like, I guess, the common language categories of the community support system. The highest response for both categories was individuals that need psychiatric help or counseling services. That aligns with our category of mental health treatment, which is our top priority and where we see most of our funding allocation going, followed by getting medication or education about medicine, and then getting medical or dental services was actually number 3. We'll have all this data in the strategic plan, so like all these visualizations will be in that report where you can see every part of it. Then we took a look at, so think of that was, what did you in the last 12 months use, and then what did you need but you couldn't get? And also the top answer there was receiving psychiatric help or counseling. So it's not only the most utilized service, but also the one that is the most needed where people are still having trouble getting. And then secondly, this is where we deviate from the first one. The second answer here is finding a group or program with people who have similar experiences. So that's more peer support. And And then thirdly was assistance with income or bills, which is that income support component of the community support system model. So, you'll note from Nicole's presentation, we didn't outline, here's the 6 priorities. It's a different way of looking at it. We might want to look at what are some of the remaining areas of the community support system that we haven't focused on, that in future grant cycles we might need to address, such as peer support and income assistance programs, for example. And then what would have helped you or someone in your household receive these services? So this is where we're getting more of that systems coordination. What are the structural barriers that are keeping you from your perception of being able to receive the service? Number one is more providers. We've identified that issue in the last 3 years ourselves, and we believe that to be solely a function of workforce, that there's a workforce shortage that we are, in the past years, started to do some discovery around. But this really confirms for us that even from the perspective of somebody who's going through the system, they're saying the same thing. There's not enough workers. Shorter wait times, which arguably might also be a function of the first thing of more providers. And then third is more payment options, which I would put that in a different category. I don't think that is the same thing, but having a local fund like the half-cent sales tax should mitigate that payment option gaps, right? Now this is the perception of administrators versus frontline staff. And the question here is, what are the easy services to get in Winnebago County? And the top answer for both categories is finding information about services. So like a resource guide or a website, that's the thing, like we think people can find information. Number two on the workers side, although no administrators answered this way, would be getting medical or dental services. And then again, third on the worker side, but not on the administrator side necessarily, was getting medication assistance. On the administrator side, number two answer is actually none of the above. So might have to unpack some of that. That would be administrator focus group, tell us what you really think, because it wasn't those ones, what is it? And then we have, this is where it kind of gets interesting for me, because this comes back to, so what was that lived experience perspective, the family member perspective, now compared to administrators and workers, what do you think would increase access? Number one answer, more providers. Number two answer, less wait times. So we're back to the same thing.
So workers and administrators.
Workers and administrators agree with lived experience and family members that we have basically have a workforce crisis. What's happening. So that remains, I think, just one of the primary areas. And then we get into accessibility and payment options, which were also the next kind of top answers with lived experience. So I won't, this is kind of what we just addressed, but showing it as a percentage difference in those. And then we just have some of the kind of write-in answers for others. So we saw in that third category for administrators, other write-in, but this is lived experience, other write-in. Some of the themes was about affordability and technology. So we saw a lot of comments on not being able to get services because of Medicaid.
Yeah.
Providers don't provide this service with Medicaid. And then not feeling like there's still enough access to telehealth services.
Well, and didn't the law just change back that you can't cross state lines for mental health teleservices? I think it was changed.
Then we have, from the perspective of mental health workers, some of the qualitative stuff we saw with the write-in answers was transportation, just improved public transit or access to public transit to be able to get to the clinics. And then back to the affordability thing, specifically indicating that Medicaid is one of the biggest barriers, that there's just some services that aren't being provided to various Medicaid recipients. So just some additional comments that, well, I won't unpack all of those today, but those will all be in the report. So as we are looking at our systems coordination objectives and strategies, we previously developed a system coordination plan. So a lot of that's now being put into this with the additional things that we've learned over the last year and that feedback from our public participation survey and environmental scan survey. So what we're looking at here is, again, access, and that's a common theme in all of our categories, but it's so critical to our mission to make sure that, in this case, we're identifying and improving the structural barriers to access. And so we're looking at, firstly, for strategies, increase the actual, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time reading it and it's not on my screen blowing up, so I'm gonna stand up for this one. Yeah, I'll read it out loud. Increase resources for limited English proficiency individuals who need mental health or substance use services. Making sure every agency has translation services. Increase availability of navigable and consistent transportation to clients to travel to and from mental health services. So theme, in better transportation to get to services. And then ensuring the affordability of mental health services. So I mean, that's kind of addressed through our contracts to a certain degree that you can't deny on payment, but I think we need to make sure that our funding is being utilized in a way that's filling those funding gaps. And, you know, we can't keep hearing that affordability is one of those top issues when we have local funding. We gotta really figure out how to close that gap. Collaboration and support. So, sorry, let me stop there for a second. Does anybody have feedback on access or questions? We'll go through each one of these categories separately.
I think we probably could put some sort of formula in place with our service providers that say if someone makes X percentage of the maximum income to make them eligible for Medicaid. So in other words, they no longer qualify because they make 60% more or 90% more. That's where we should be stepping in to make sure that for hourly services, we're funding those things. Because sometimes even the sliding scale, it sounds great, but if the slide that you're choosing between is light bill, food, childcare, mental health services.
So identifying those like insurance donut holes, basically, or
Right.
your
And income donut holes
yeah,
where
income donut
they don't
holes.
make enough to get care, but they are too poor to afford care.
Yeah. That's great feedback. I think that's important often in this population.
That's, yeah.
And some of this is outside of the control of organization. So if somebody utilizes a funded program and there's another resource or service needed and they make a referral, that's no longer responsibility or anything under the funded program, but now they've gone to another entity or something, and then the issue exists there, not at a funded program.
So maybe that's something, when we talk about that pool of money, maybe that's something we can be looking at for utilization. Same thing with transportation. Maybe we at one time talked about mental health issues, you know.
I could just go back for a moment to the lack of providers, which was the number one. So I think that these things are all interconnected. Working at the place I worked at for many years down the road, that was always an issue. There are creative ways to address that, but identifying the core, because that's not a Rockford or Winnebago County issue of mental health, it's a nationwide issue. So figuring out how to differentiate this market for providers to encourage them to locate here is an agency by agency initiative to how to present themselves to potential employees, providers to come here. But also there is an ecosystem of which we may play a part. So to this point, you know, certainly what our experience was, unfortunately, Rockford was a barrier at times to hiring professionals. But then you get to other things like compensation. How does it compare? Quality of life, all sorts of other things that make an individual person's decision about where to locate professionally is tied up in a lot of different things. To your point, if the uniqueness of this group is tips the scale in some fashion or form to the ecosystem of mental health care, maybe that provides something to a potential candidate to say, oh, this community in the mental health room is doing something fairly unique. And it might mean, and I don't know, I can see all sorts of issues, and we're not gonna, I don't believe there's not really enough time to solve this today. But if there was a way to supplement care, because one of the issues, and having dealt with, Mary Ann, you dealt with it, I dealt with it where I was, the payer mix in this community is very challenged, as is the demographic in this community. So when it gets to reimbursement for services, we see it in the proposals that we evaluate. There are so many donut holes or gaps in reimbursement. That's a barrier to someone coming here too. If I'm going to come here and make 20% less here than I would make in a similar community, and I have latitude and I'm sought out, I mean, I can go anywhere in the country right now if I'm a person like that. Why would they come here? They might come here because that barrier has been removed. There's a vibrant ecosystem that's being developed that supports mental health. So maybe in there somewhere is a secret sauce or a mixture of things that this group actually represents. It could make us more attractive.
I agree with that. Next, in August, we're having Dr. Stegner Green and someone else present.
Yeah.
They're gonna open,
Yeah.
At least if we could be a part of establishing a school where homegrown, your
Right.
labor force.
Yeah.
I think it's a beginning, it's a.
You would hope it would be like the rural health thing was turned out to be. that because
Yeah,
the
I mean, they're.
Training is here, a lot of
Yeah,
people get comfortable and are willing to stay.
yeah,
Or particularly like Bill, in your point of, if our agencies are really doing a good job and really at the edge of the art in terms of the kinds of things they're doing, at least people would be willing to give us 2 or 3 or 4 years in terms of starting their careers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
right.
Something develop that.
Yeah, so you're getting to 2.4 a little bit, which is
Yeah.
good. So we'll get there in just a second. I'm gonna read 2.2, which is collaboration support. Improve network cohesion and coordination of services among funded programs. So including promotion and development of referral systems, where we get into like things like Iris, which is kind of taking off a little bit. I think we've got 18 organizations now that are on board for the first pilot round of that, and half of them, if I remember correctly, are funded programs from the Mental Health Board. But promotion and development of referral systems for mental health and substance use services and resources for clients to seamlessly transition from one service to another. I think Iris is that vehicle for now that we have to see how that plays out. There's a lot of momentum around that. We want to evaluate that in the pilot. We are the data. We signed the agreement to be the data repository for that data. So we'll get to see what type of system, capacity there is through that in terms of like wait times and times to fill referral to assessment. Invest in a resource sharing platform to ensure all funded programs have access to evidence-based literature, practice guides, and training. So kind of like what we were talking about a little bit earlier. So I think things like a mental health symposium is a great idea, but even there's like, in terms of a joint procurement opportunity, how do we make sure that there's a resource that every agency even has access to peer reviewed journal articles? Because that's not necessarily everybody has access to, unless you have, like a master's intern that you're with and you're asking them to use their school library. So kind of want to look into that opportunity. Is there a way that we can create something that everyone in the system of care has access to make sure they're getting the most up-to-date research, and how they utilize that appropriately in our community might be a different question. Ensure the quality of local services through promotion and accreditation providers and programs. how do we make sure our local programs are getting accredited when there's opportunities to do that? I don't have tactics identified for this yet, but I think it's an area that we might want to unpack and see what current barriers might exist to that and where we can offer support to get everyone to that level. Improve and maintain working relationships with local and state government officials, and this is something that we do a lot through our membership at ACMI on the state level. And I know the board gets really involved with those local relationships, and certainly by function of your agreement with Region 1 Planning Council, a lot of the mayors and county chairmen sit on our board, so we get the opportunity to communicate directly some of our work there as well. And then being aware of new policies and their implications on local services. So again, just as part of ACMI and other networks that we're part of, always learning what's that legislation that's being considered today and what's going to be the implication of that tomorrow, and are we as a community ready for that? And where we're not, what do we need to be communicating about readiness for that, or about the misalignment between the legislators' vision and what our local agencies have the capacity to do. So just quickly, any feedback on collaboration support in terms of the objective or the strategy statements?
Do we have an active coordination like with 988? You know, there's all kinds of stuff going on at the state level. And
Yeah, I'm part of the regional assessment task force, and that's coordinating a lot of that. I mean, 988 is not directly part of that. 988 has its own task force. It's all interconnected. So whenever we're talking about crisis response right now, we're basically talking about 988 mobile crisis teams, 911, STESA, and how all of that works together. So between our ACMI membership, the regional task force, and then where our local partners are telling us, some of whom sit on the state task force, that conversation is happening all the time. Yeah. Any others? Okay, moving along, diversity, equity, and inclusion, promote cultural competence and cultural humility practices in mental health systems of care. Just briefly, cultural competence is that I'm going to learn about a culture that's not mine, so I'm educated about it. So I'm aware of maybe what the differences are. Cultural humility is the lens of, even through education, I'm never going to be an expert. So I still need to have the disposition that I need to learn from the person I'm serving. We don't see those as a dichotomy. We don't see those as either or. We see those as both and, that they're both important. That one without the other is not sufficient. So host mental health fairs to educate and reframe community members' understanding about mental health and substance use services, and keep them engaged and informed about treatment options. Mental health fairs that are aimed at a particular community, subset of the community, sometimes can be one of the best ways to help different parts of the community learn about what resources are available and have those real conversations about what some of the gaps and barriers are. And then secondly, pursue organizational, let's say, culture of humility. I think we would want to add cultural competence to that in both the mental health board and the funded programs. So it was noted to us through our funding agreements this year that we sent to board members for feedback. One of the things we do not have currently incorporated is a cultural competence requirement. I think in future years, we need to look at what that type of requirement needs to be and how we make sure we're promoting the availability of resources for every program to be successful in meeting that objective. Any questions, comments, or feedback on those goals? Okay, and then lastly, we already started the conversation here about workforce development. We know that so much of this is so many of the issues we're facing with wait times is a function of this foundational problem. And to Dr. Gorski's point, it's a national problem, so there's not an easy fix because it, to a certain degree right now, in this current moment, it is a little bit of a zero-sum game. You only have so many workers that meet the criteria, and you are stealing from another. Locally, it's happening, one provider is taken from another. The state level, it's happening, one community is taken from another, and nationwide, it's happening, states are taking from one another. So yes, how do we position ourselves to be, you know, our organizations to attract? But how do we also start to grow some of our own workforce? We have been meeting with a mental health pathways work group that is in partnership with the Workforce Connection, the Workforce Board. They're kind of the experts in this space broadly. They've done work around engineering pathways locally. We have convened education providers, specifically the curriculum developers. That's kind of who we targeted in each educational institution locally. And then also clinical directors for mental health organizations, the ones that are sometimes doing the hiring or also doing that supervision to say, who do I actually need? So the question has been, who would you hire in an ideal state? If you could have the resume that you wanted, what would the credentialing be? And the conversation with the educational institutions, is that a resume that you produce? Is that a credential that you produce? And what we found is there are three, I would say, high priority areas, or where we think there could be the most strategic focus, and that is in number one, career pathways for the social work field. And we're talking about getting somebody to that MSW degree, because there's so much that can be done with that, from a master's level to a license level to ultimately eventually being a supervisor that then supervises other MSWs to get that same credential. So we feel that that was information that came to us through this discovery group. We find that that's one of the most critical pathways. Secondly is the peer recovery support specialist. That is a credential that only requires a GED or high school diploma. You can have a bachelor's degree and get it. For that matter, you probably have a master's degree and get it. But whether you're at a GED level or bachelor's degree level, having this credential not only really helps with the, I guess what agencies really value and what somebody's learning, but also it is a critical credential for what's happening with the future of crisis response from the state of Illinois, which is they are mobilizing, excuse the pun, mobile crisis response teams that combine a licensed clinician with a peer recovery support specialist. So that's an area that other communities already are developing programs, but the closest one for us is in Elgin. We have a lot of people in our community that are literally driving to Elgin Community College to do that. And then what we found, what we've heard is that Elgin Community College doesn't have the local relationships to plug them into an internship. So we feel that there needs to be something locally that's addressing that, both from who's doing the training and then what's that network to make sure that paid internship has a host site and then that person's plugged into an agency where they can work. And then thirdly is developing a career pathway for the nurse practitioner field. What we've heard is that really, whether we like the idea or not, whether anybody likes the idea or not, everyone would love to have a psychiatrist. The reality is you're going to get a nurse practitioner. Okay, in the community mental health field, that's the current reality, is that most of the prescribing, credential is going to be that nurse practitioner. So we have a lot of nursing programs locally. Are those nursing programs set up to make sure that nurse practitioner has behavioral health experience and could plug into one of those community mental health providers and have the knowledge of psychotropic medication kind of prescription? So that's the third one that that group's really identified that we're looking at, that I've codified into the goals here. And then I think the fourth one is cross-cutting across all of these, which is then how do we support the retention of those workers locally? So, you know,
Goes to bills.
you get your credential, you get license, and then you leave. You go plug into private practice, or you cross the border because you want to be in medicine, or you go and say, how do we really try to promote best practices that are for the retention of workforce in these fields? So just quickly, I'll let anyone comment on that or give some feedback. Do you feel like these are the right strategies?
Including maybe the pharmacy school, and then training model.
That's what I was just gonna mention, the linkage between the PhD psychologists and pharmacists has also been used in numbers of places. To manage for the lack of psychiatry. Southern Illinois, that's a very frequent model.
Okay. Would you see that nurse practitioner one, maybe we should broaden it to prescribing pathways for prescribers, medication prescribers?
What are they? Yes.
We can have flexibility to focus on maybe a couple different pathways. Measures of success. So
You have.
a few things that, again, and some of these might be things that we just feel confident that we can measure, and maybe some of them have to evolve as we do contract with some evaluation support, but increasing the percentage of mental health organizations that provide interpretation services, we think that's critical. You know, at some point, I'd like that green part of that to grow when it be 100% provide that. And also looking at the number of languages that interpretation is provided. So, you know, getting everyone to 100% Spanish, that would be a great goal. But then what about Arabic? What about all these other languages that we know exist locally? So, increasing the percentage of residents who feel services are able to be reached in their area. So we do kind of cover that in our public participation survey. Maybe that needs to be something that we do some touch point on annually, but do you feel like services are accessible when and where you need them? Are you getting to them when and where you need them? 100% of funded organizations do not turn away residents on the ability to pay. So that's our goal. Might be a lofty goal, but I feel like we need to get there. It's part of our contractual requirements. We want to make sure that's across all services provided if possible. Referral platform utilized by all funded agencies. We know right now it's just being piloted. We want to learn from that. We want to address whatever concerns and barriers there are. And we want to make sure that it is utilized in an end goal by all of our organizations, because that's the best way to create a cohesive, support system to ensure this continuity of care. We want to get those 3 career pathways to exist for mental health providers in the clinician pathway, that peer recovery support pathway, and that prescribing pathway. And then we could add additional metrics in terms of counting how many people graduate those pathways, how many get connected locally. I think we can build on those for sure. How many are retained locally? And then lastly is 100% of our funded programs utilize cultural competency practices. So building that infrastructure, availability of training and resources, and making sure all of our organizations are plugging into it. Anything we're missing on that? Anything that you think needs to be refined in terms of those measures of success?
Just footnote.
Yeah.
We need to define what a resident is at some point. That's a growing issue.
Would this be, it's in draft form currently, Jason, would this be what ultimately you would be asking us to approve as the distillation of the plan, things that we measured as evidence of success of what the 3 of you just presented? Would this be it?
Yeah, essentially. So that is the quick answer is yes. In terms of just a reminder of the process, we will now take your feedback. We'll incorporate any, additions that are needed or refinements. We will take a draft back to the board, I think in August, and then we will put it out for public comment.
Great.
We'll take public comment, make any changes that might be required based on that, and then put it back to the board for final approval, and then that will be it for 3 years.
I guess,
So there would be the month of September, just saying, so about 30 days, if give or take, to be able to have public comments.
I guess the one, just last comment I have was that you've done, it's phenomenal, all the work that you've done. I certainly lost count of what you and Nicole and Chelsea presented and all of the strategies for which execution and tactics would follow. I'm concerned about the bandwidth of all of you. Our bandwidth, of all the things that you presented, there are 6 things there. And probably a number of the things that you presented wouldn't necessarily trail on those 6. So I think there is some discussion maybe internally of what do you feel as a staff among all those things that you would like to accomplish? There had to be 40 plus of them, right? You add up all of your.
If we got to every strategy, I would say, yeah, maybe roughly in that ballpark. I think some of the things we're already doing, we're building on that. So it's just already part of the operation. I get your point though, are we taking on too much? I think some of it, the ones that Chelsea was talking about, some of those are things we're mandating through our contract requirements with organizations. So it's going to be funded organization driven, and we're more of the monitoring to make sure it's happening. Probably the loftiest goals might be in the systems coordination stuff.
Yeah.
You know, frankly speaking, but it's hard for me to envision how we can be successful without addressing those at the same time.
Exactly.
So,
Right.
And it's also a 3-year strategic plan, so it's not, we're not saying,
they're not.
you know, that it's a chunk by chunk, year by
That's
year.
right.
Especially like the pathways, right? Like to say at the end of 3 years, 3 career pathways exist, it's amazing, but we can make as much progress, as much work, as that
Right.
collectively.
Getting
Yeah.
more people doing the contract requirements.
are you thinking of sequencing
Well,
goals?
I don't want to spend too much time talking about my lived experience, but if there are 40 plus things to be concentrated on,
That's right.
it's not gonna work. So, and we used to do down there 3 to 5 year strategic plans that had like 4 things with a couple things underneath them. So, because it gets to what can you all do, and I understand some of it's embedded contractually and what you guys know all that, and I know some of it, not all of it. You know, what do you want to percolate up to us? In a typical board sense, we would kind of be holding you accountable for things that you feel we should be giving you feedback. So is it those 6? Ultimately, it's going to be those. And there are things in there that are attempting to address the workforce issue, obviously, but that winds up being one of the major ones. So as it's distilled, I would just encourage you to be realistic about what you all can focus on and what you want our help with and what you want us to focus on.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. I think that's a good way for us to think about how to present the plan back after this feedback.
It's phenomenal.
What are the, maybe, you know, we'd love to do everything.
Yeah.
What are the top 5 most critical
Right.
goals that we want to make sure that we're most accountable to?
Right.
But in that same vein,
And I might have been part of that past experience that you're reflecting on, like lofty goals with many objectives.
Oh, yeah.
We've all been there.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you have set up a structure, I think,
yeah.
in our partners that maybe, you know, many hands make light work. You know, I think you've created that hand-holding process so that it makes it more possible. So,
And I think the fact that we're using them, again, going back, using the community support program, that one slide of showing where we are in terms of the development of the array goes a long way. And with Bill's issue, of kind of like prioritizing around what are those system priorities that you want to see done.
Great.
Yeah.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
Can I get a copy of all this?
Yes.
Yeah,
we will
we'll send it out. You know,
Yeah.
I have an exciting.
Yeah.
name, so I can
we
read it.
didn't want to give it out.
If you don't mind us,
It is awesome.
So
Thank you.
We are still in a board meeting
Yes.
and we will have to go now back to the agenda for. the-
Adjournment.
Yes.
I would like
I
to
need
make
a
a
motion.
motion.
Wait, before we adjourn, you guys know Jay Ware passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
And, Jay's time on this board was tenure was short. But I really liked the guy. After he was gone, we would still go out for, lunch and coffee, and he even called me one time. I'm on a beach in Florida, and Jay, God, it's gotta be important. Jay's calling. And he always went, so tonight, before you close your eyes, say a prayer for him, would you?
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you very much. I move for adjournment.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.